Chapter 260. On the other side of the office on the top floor, Li Yao sat on a chair and sneered while smoking a cigar. "Aren't you very good at fighting? I'd like to see if a rocket can kill you." The answer was, of course, no. Qi Yu used his tall body to completely protect Huang Wei. In a hurry, he could only care about using energy to cushion Huang Wei's body when she fell to the ground. Listening to the extremely violent roar, Huang Wei's brain completely fell into a blank, and she couldn't recover for a long time. When her consciousness returned to her brain and she gradually woke up, she roughly understood what had happened and screamed, "Vice President! I'm fine." A low and calm voice sounded in Huang Wei's ears. Qi Yu jumped up and in the blink of an eye, he had already disappeared from the broken window. He was attacked as soon as he arrived here. Qi Yu's heart was already filled with cold, murderous intent. He didn't care about himself, but he would never allow such a threat to always stay with his parents. At this time, he couldn't care less about shocking the world. In a flash, he had rushed to the top of the building where the rocket was launched at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. A man dressed in black was about to put away the rocket launcher and leave immediately. Suddenly, an invisible pressure completely locked his body in place. Before he could react, an invisible pressure completely locked his body. Before he could react, a tall man had already come in front of him. As he stretched out his hand, Qi Yu grabbed the man's throat. A strong murderous intent made this sneak attack guy unable to move at all. A strange light lit up from Qi Yu's eyes. He was very clear that the person who dared to carry out this kind of task must be a man of sacrifice. It was impossible to ask anything from him. In this case, he would use his own method. A huge spiritual force directly poured into the mind of the man in black. Needless to say, Qi Yu quickly scanned through his mind with his own spiritual force. At that moment, everything he wanted had already been achieved. This man in black came here after receiving a phone call, and the voice left in his mind was very familiar to Qi Yu. It was left by the man who asked him to get out of the way in the elevator. There was no need to ask any more questions. Everything had become very clear. He casually tossed the black-clothed man's body to the side and scanned through his memories. This person had already become an idiot. In a flash, Qi Yu returned to his office. At this time, Qi Tianlei, Ying Xiaodai, and the 4 people sent by the Yellow Flame Soul to protect them had already appeared in Qi Yu's office. He was asking Huang Wei something. Huang Wei's face was pale as she looked at the mess in the office. Of course, she knew that Qi Yu had saved her life at the critical moment. However, she had no idea where Qi Yu had gone. Just when she was unable to answer the anxious Qi Tianlei and his wife, Qi Yu had already returned. "Dad, Mom, I'm fine." Qi Yu suddenly appeared. The 4 members of the Yellow Flame Soul were shocked. Fortunately, the Sword Soul among them recognized Qi Yu. Seeing the freak Qi Yu, he could not help but take a step back. Because he did not protect himself in time, Qi Yu's body was fine. However, he looked a little disheveled. The front was fine, but the back of his suit was blown to pieces, and half of his buttocks were exposed. Qi Tianlei's face was a little twisted at this time. He had finally found his son, but immediately encountered such a situation. How could he not be angry? His eyes flashed coldly. Your body." Qi Yu shook his head and said, "Dad, don't worry. I'm very strong. However, there must be a conclusion to this matter. I don't want to always have a threat around you. Leave this matter to me. Members of the Yellow Flame Soul, listen up." As he spoke, Qi Yu touched the Kongdong seal on his chest and summoned his Diamond Guardian Medal. General Ji had told him that the Diamond Guardian Medal could be used to mobilize the Yellow Flame Soul, but only within the capital. The 4 members of the Yellow Flame Soul quickly responded when they saw the Diamond Guardian Medal in his hand. Then, they heard Qi Yu's voice in their ears. Qi Yu's instructions were very simple. After receiving his order, the 4 members of the Yellow Flame Soul immediately went to work. Huang Wei was too frightened, so Qi Tianlei asked someone to send her to the hospital. After changing his clothes, Chi Yu also quietly left the headquarters of the Golden Grain Group. He did not want to be questioned endlessly by the police. For some things, it was better to use his own methods to solve them faster. In just one day, the capital's business world was shaken. Li Yao, the vice chairman of the board of directors of the Golden Grain Group and the chairman of the board of directors of the Zhonghen Group, donated all the assets under his name to the National Charity Association of the Yanhuang Republic. At the same time, he resigned from all his positions in the two groups. After doing this, Li Yao disappeared from this world. There were many people who disappeared at the same time, but those people did not need to be known to outsiders. Chi Yu did it very simply. With the strength of the yellow flame soul, it was naturally easy to find out everything about Li Yao. After reporting to General Ji, he began his own operation. Was it difficult to get Li Yao to transfer his assets to the national charity? It was not difficult. When a person's mind was completely controlled, everything became easy. The foreign mercenaries and the forces in the dark that he had hired were completely wiped out by Chi Yu in one day. As for how he cleaned them up, it could only be explained by the word bloody. At the same time, according to the clues left by Li Yao, Chi Yu sent all the members of the Dragon Zodiac team, the Tiger Zodiac team, and the Chicken Zodiac team out of the country. The mission given to these 36 people was to eliminate all of Li Yao's forces abroad. With the information left by Li Yao, these things were not difficult to solve. As for the shock caused by Li Yao's demise in the business world, it was easily pacified by the government's intervention. A week later, it was even impossible to search for Li Yao's name on the internet. Son, isn't it a little too cruel to do this? At this time, there were only him and Chi Yu in Chi Tianlei's office. In this week, he finally knew how strong his son was. He did not need to do anything at all, and everything was completely solved. With the backing of the country, coupled with his own strong strength, it was very easy for Chi Yu to get rid of Li Yao. Even more than half of the Jili people were destroyed by his hands, let alone Li Yao. As for why the country cooperated, it was actually very simple. Everything was going through legal procedures. Why would the country not be willing to put tens of billions of US dollars into the national treasury? Since it was a normal legal procedure, and Li Yao had made a public appearance and voluntarily donated, international law was not a big deal. At least, most people thought that it was because Li Yao was old and had earned enough money. He wanted to do some good deeds and retire to leave a good reputation. As for where he went, not many people would pay attention. Of course, even if they paid attention, it would be useless. The Yanhuang Republic cleaned up Chi Yu's mess. Didn't they clean up the mess? Of course, there were other reasons why the country strongly supported Chi Yu. Whether it was Chi Yu's own strength or the Guardian of the East that he represented, he was a strength that the country desperately needed. For the country, Chi Yu had made great contributions. The original fruits sent by Kirin Group had left a very deep impression on the leaders of the country. Not to mention the free contribution, the benefits of those fruits had indeed benefited the leaders a lot, although the impact this time was not small. But as a country, it was still very easy to settle. Dad, when facing the enemy, you must not be soft-hearted. I'm not afraid of other things, but if they do something bad to you and Mom and I can't stop it, I will definitely regret it for the rest of my life. So, no matter what, I have to solve the potential threat for you. However, in order to avoid suspicion, I have transferred the shares of Golden Grain Group in Li Yao's hands to the country. But don't worry, the country has already agreed to sell the shares of Golden Grain Group to us at a low price. When the time comes, you can go to the State Council Charity Fund office in person. Won't the problem be solved? You and Mom's shares, together with Li Yao's, are close to half. I want to see who can threaten your position as the chairman of the board in the future. Greed is Li Yao's arrogant mistake. If he threatens my family, there can only be one result. Chi Yu didn't do anything to Li Yao. He just sent Li Yao to the big forest of the ancient beast. He didn't do anything to Li Yao's family. After all, his family was innocent. He also took this opportunity to send Xiao Lu to the ancient beasts and let Yi Ruo be in charge of protecting her. He also told Xiao Lu that he would bring her back after a month. When Xiao Lu came to the ancient beasts, she had long forgotten about Qi Yu. That scene was as shocking to her as it was to the plant soul. The threat of the Jili people had been eliminated. With the guarantee of the great rock wisdom king, the beasts wouldn't be able to threaten humans. At least for a long period of time, humans would be safe. Therefore, Qi Yu could rest assured that Xiao Lu was there. After the Battle of Mount Everest, he would bring Xiao Lu back. It would be about time. Qi Tianlei sighed and said, "Since the problem has been solved, we can only do this. But, my child, heaven has the virtue of cherishing life. It's better for you to not kill so much in the future." Qi Yu walked to Qi Tianlei's side and held his father's arm. He said, "I will. But sometimes I can't help myself. There are some things that I can't control. Dad, I can only promise you one thing. No matter what I do, I have a clear conscience." Qi Tianlei looked at his son deeply and nodded. He said, "I believe you." After the incident with Li Yao, although Li Yao's problem had been completely solved, Qi Tianlei no longer forced Qi Yu to work at the Golden Valley Group. Qi Yu's potential power made Qi Tianlei understand that his son still had many things to do. It was impossible for him to be limited to a single company. Therefore, he sped up the construction of the new land next to the Dragon Field courtyard. At the same time, he released Qi Yu, allowing him to return to the Dragon Field courtyard and continue his free life. He only requested that Qi Yu accompany the couple for at least one day a week. When Qi Yu finished dealing with Li Yao's matter, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors returned. Qi Yu did not set a time for their return, but every Zodiac Guardian warrior understood how important the Battle of Mount Everest was to them and Qi Yu. Therefore, after returning home to report to their families that they were safe, they quickly returned to the Dragon Field courtyard. The final sprint before the duel had begun. And this final training, for the Zodiac Guardian warriors, played a crucial role. The 15 days of training were almost non-stop. With Qi Yu as the center, everyone devoted themselves to the process of improving their own strength. They all knew that there was no time for them to waste. Everything had to be completed according to the predetermined track. And the final result would be decided by their own strength. For survival, and for the future of the East, who could slack off? Mount Everest was the main peak of the Himalayas, the highest mountain in the world, with an altitude of 8,848.13 meters. It was located in the middle of the Himalayas, at the junction of Tibet and the Kingdom of Nepal in the Yenhuang Republic. The mountain was mainly composed of crystalline rock. The glaciers were large, with more than 600 glaciers covering an area of 1,600 square kilometers. It was the center of modern glaciation in the low latitude. Tall ice towers were commonly developed in the middle and upper reaches of the ice tongues, which was a special form of glaciers in the valleys of Mount Everest. There were large ice cirques in the north, east, and southwest of Mount Everest, making Mount Everest a pyramid-shaped peak that was 3,000 meters above the bottom of the ice cirque. On the northern slope of Mount Everest, at an altitude of 7,450 meters, was the boundary between ice and rock. The lower part was covered with ice and snow, while the upper part was exposed due to the steep cliffs and strong winds. The peak was often shrouded in clouds and mist, as if the flag was fluttering from west to east with Mount Everest as the pole. This was a unique meteorological phenomenon of Mount Everest, and people called it the flag cloud. At this time, on the northern slope of Mount Everest, a group of more than a dozen people were climbing quickly. It should be known that after an altitude of more than 7,000 meters, the temperature and the thinness of oxygen were no longer bearable for ordinary people. As for the dozen or so people who were climbing the mountain, they looked very relaxed. They were also wearing ordinary clothes and not special winter clothes. They were the Zodiac Guardian Warriors led by Chi-Yu. The appointment with Yamu was coming. In Chi-Yu's mind, all the experiences he had with Yamu kept flashing. Those scenes were so real in front of him. From the amazement when they first met, to the love later, to the friendship in Athens for several months, to the betrayal in the end, all of these left the deepest mark in Chi-Yu's heart. In the looming light, the group of 13 people climbed the last 1,000 meters, which should have been the most difficult, in just over 10 minutes, and arrived at the main peak of Mount Everest. In the distance, they looked at the white snow below, and clouds of snow fog and strong wind constantly blew at their bodies. Chi-Yu was the first to arrive at the peak. He stood alone at the highest place, looking a little bleak. Obviously, they had arrived before their opponent. The 12 people stood neatly behind him. No one said a word, and their eyes were a little dignified. This was no longer a matter of Chi-Yu alone, but a battle between the Eastern and Western Guardians. They all knew that they must not lose today. Chi-Yu lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, he raised his head, and his body trembled slightly. His eyes, which seemed to be solid, shot toward the south like sharp arrows. At this moment, a graceful figure slowly rose from below. It seemed that she did not need to borrow any force, and she floated up to the peak. The 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors standing behind Chi-Yu automatically spread out, forming a semicircle. Only Chi-Yu did not move, but his solid eyes were fixed on the graceful figure that was slowly approaching. Finally, like an auspicious cloud, the woman floated to the peak. She was wearing a long dress as white as snow, and her whole body was shrouded in a faint light and shadow. Her beautiful and slender figure seemed to be wearing a layer of golden chiffon. Her faintly discernible jade-white skin made it impossible for people to stare at her. Her oval face was as pure as ice, and her beautiful eyes were clear and beautiful. She had a small and exquisite nose, and slightly curved and plump cherry lip. Her facial features were extremely exquisite. Her slender and delicate body was also so perfect. She had a slender waist, breathtakingly long and beautiful legs, and exquisite curves that were wrapped in a faint white light. She was filled with a sacred aura, and the most peculiar thing was her long purple hair. It did not seem to be dyed, but natural, like purple silk fluttering behind her back. At this moment, her eyes happened to be looking at the man in red. Her purple eyes were filled with desolation and helplessness. Her small white teeth gently bit her lips. Yamu said softly in authentic Yenwang language, "You finally arrived before me. Actually, I never hoped that this battle would come." Chi-Yu's voice was still so low. "But it will come in the end. After you made that choice, this battle was inevitable. You killed me once, and in the end, you let me go. There is no longer any connection between you and me. But Wen Ting, Klinsman, and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King all died because of you and me. Today, I will seek justice for them. At the same time, I also want to see on the highest peak in the world who is the real strong between us, the Guardians of the East and the West." Apart from a few traces of vicissitudes, there was no other emotion in his voice. Yamu nodded gently and said in a low voice, "Regarding that matter, I have nothing to say. For the sake of our mission, we cannot retreat." She slowly raised her right hand, and with a gentle wave, the scepter of the goddess of victory appeared out of thin air. She slowly raised the scepter into the air, and a deep golden light shot out from the tip of the scepter. Instantly, the snow in the air dissipated under the influence of the golden light, and the air exuded an even more pure and holy aura. At this moment, 12 faintly discernible figures flashed up the southern slope of Mount Everest. Each of them looked a little bloated, and as they got closer, one could see that each of them carried a huge box on their back. Chi-Yu knew that the Zodiac Guardians had already brought their constellations. What the Zodiac Guardian Warriors were about to face would definitely be the 12 Zodiac Guardians at full strength. Their figures were getting closer and closer. Through the feeling of his spiritual power, Chi-Yu knew that it was not only him and the Zodiac Guardian warriors that had improved. The Zodiac Guardians had also made great progress during this period of time. As for how much progress they had made, he did not know. After Goddess Athena's divinity was completely absorbed by Yamu, her strength had increased by leaps and bounds in a short period of time, and she had become the true Goddess Athena. The increase in strength of Yamu had also caused the 12 Zodiac Guardians to improve under the effects of her divine energy. Just like how Yamu had become the true Athena, they had also become the true Zodiac Guardians of Athena. The area of the peak of Mount Everest was not big. When the 12 Zodiac Guardians arrived at the peak, the entire peak seemed to be a little crowded. Cold air constantly blew from the peak of the mountain. If it were not for the fact that the 26 people on the peak had extraordinary strength, the cold wind would have easily caused them to lose consciousness. The 12 Zodiac Guardians stood calmly behind Yamu. Yuyun lowered her head. She did not even dare to look at Chi-Yu. The other Zodiac Guardians looked at Chi-Yu with different gazes, but none of them were hostile. After all, deep in their hearts, they knew who was right and who was wrong. Of course, they would not think that Yamu's decision was wrong. For Greece to be able to completely inherit the divinity of Athena, everything was worth it. The only thing that made these Zodiac Guardians feel a little uneasy was that Chi-Yu had turned from a friend to an enemy. They did not know what would happen to them in the end. There were 13 people on both sides, and they stood there quietly under the cold wind. The flag cloud on the peak of Mount Everest fluttered, and the fog constantly swept past them, making them feel a little damp. The light of the scepter of the goddess of victory in Yamu's hand dimmed. She looked at Chi-Yu for a long time before she said, "Since everyone is here, let's begin. Chi-Yu, how do you want to decide the winner?" Chi-Yu looked at Yamu and said, "It's very simple. Although today's battle is between you and me, it also concerns the relationship between the Guardians of the East and the West. Although in my heart, you are definitely my enemy. You are definitely an enemy, but this has nothing to do with your constellation protectors. Other than the battle between you and me, in order to protect our East and your West, they do not need to decide life and death." Chi-Yu's words were very calm. Master Zagru had a great influence on what he said. At the same time, Chi-Yu did not want to see his comrades pay with their lives because of his personal grudge. Yamu looked at Chi-Yu deeply, and a deep sadness flashed in the depths of her eyes. "All right, since that's the case, I know what to do. The space at the peak of Mount Everest is very narrow. Why don't we start one battle at a time? Both sides will fight according to the order of your Zodiac and our Zodiac. Every battle will end when the winner is decided. The final winner will be decided according to the number of battles. If we lose, then the Greek Guardian will listen to the Eastern Guardian's orders, and vice versa. How about it?" Hearing Yamu's words, Chi-Yu could not help but feel moved. If he could obtain the authority of the Zodiac Guardians, his strength would undoubtedly increase. But why did Yamu say that? Could it be that they had absolute confidence in winning? From his previous contact with the Zodiac Guardians, the 12 Zodiac Guardians' strength was about the same. But it was different for his side. The difference in strength between the Zodiac Guardian warriors was not small. It was hard to say who would win. "If the final battle is between you and me with 6 wins each, what do you say?" Chi-Yu asked. Yamu said, "Then we will decide the final winner by our life and death. Isn't that what you want?" Chi-Yu looked at Yamu, a cold, killing intent flashed past his eyes. "All right, it's a deal." Yamu added, "If the final battle is a draw, then, let all of us join forces for the final battle. Let's see who has the highest overall strength. Before coming here, I have already instructed my Zodiac Guardians, even if I die, they will keep their promise and listen to your orders." Chi-Yu nodded his head and said, "Me too. But how do you expect me to trust you?" Yamu was stunned for a moment. Looking at the cold gaze in Chi-Yu's eyes, her heart could not help but ache, but she could not say anything. After all, she had lied to Chi-Yu before. And it was even his feelings that she lied to. Chi-Yu, don't go overboard. Even if Miss had hurt you before, she had no choice. Mephistopheles could not help but stand up and reprimand Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu looked at him coldly and said, "You have no right to speak to me. You." Mephistopheles' eyes were filled with anger. But feeling the terrifying aura from Chi-Yu, he actually could not muster up enough courage to attack Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu swept the Qilin concealment cloak off his head, revealing a head of snow-white hair that fluttered in the wind. "I'll trust you one more time. If you do not keep your promise, then Greece will no longer have a guardian." As he said that, he turned around and wanted to return to his side. Mephistopheles looked at Yumu and said in a low voice, "Mississippi." Yumu raised her hand and stopped him from continuing. "All right, let's get ready to begin. Today's battle is unavoidable, but for the East and West to be able to fight against the future danger together, we must choose to form an alliance. After the hatred between me and Chi-Yu is resolved. Remember what I said before, once we lose, no one is allowed to go back on their promise. If not, it will be going against Goddess Athena's orders." Learning from Chi-Yu, she walked back to her Constellation Guardian team. "White Demon Constellation Guardian, come out," Yumu said calmly. After White Demon Constellation Eunice bowed to Yumu, he slowly walked out. A faint white light aura lit up from his body, causing the snow on Mount Everest to be unable to enter a 1-meter radius around him. Chi-Yu's gaze landed on Vol and nodded his head. Vol looked at Chi-Yu and gave him a determined look. Before he came, he had already thought it through. If he were to face an enemy alone, even if he died, he would not lose. For the sake of the humiliation that Boss had suffered, he would fight. "Zodiac Guardian God Warrior, Rat," Vol bellowed. His short and stout body was filled with energy. His voice shook the snowy peak, causing the snow to tremble. His gaze locked onto his opponent. All the thundercloud force in his body was quickly mobilized. White Demon Constellation Eunice looked at Vol and bowed slightly. The white light aura on his body became even stronger. The two of them made a please gesture at the same time. The battle between the Zodiac Guardian God and Constellation Guardian God finally began. The first battle was between the Rat Zodiac Warrior and the White Demon Constellation Guardian God. The entire peak of Mount Everest was only about 100 square meters. Furthermore, the ground was not sturdy. There were many people standing around. The space for the two of them to fight was less than 100 meters. Vol did not move. The thundercloud force in his body continued to increase. The short hair on his head had gradually turned gray. His gaze was extremely sharp. He slowly extended his arms forward, revealing a pair of hands that did not match his body. It was a pair of sparkling and translucent Ryua hands. His fingers were extremely long. On every finger there was a 3-inch-long nail. He squinted his small eyes. His sharp gaze was like a knife, tearing apart Eunice's mental defenses. Eunice also did not move. However, the white energy surrounding his body was moving at a rapid pace. When he first saw Vol, he could not help but look down on his opponent. The energy undulations on Vol's body were obviously not as strong as his. Furthermore, with his body size, it was impossible for him to be more agile than him. However, when Vol's sharp gaze landed on his body, Eunice knew that he was wrong. From Vol's gaze, he could see the determination for victory. He knew that this battle would not be easy for him to win. Vol finally moved. He moved before White Demon Constellation Eunice. His fat body suddenly took a step forward. His right hand reached out and grabbed towards the opponent's chest. At this time, he was about 3 meters away from Eunice. An ear-piercing sound came out. The nails on Vol's right hand were completely extended. 5 rays of sharp gray light shot out. It was as though they were real. In an instant, they arrived in front of Eunice. Chapter 261. After Eunice used his ability to block Vol's attack, He turned around and leapt high into the air, dodging Vol's attack. Following that, with his head down and legs up, he pounced towards Vol. Vol lost his opponent and quickly raised his head to look at the sky. Just as he was about to receive the attack, his fat body suddenly tensed up, as though he was bound by some kind of energy. He was unable to move at all, and Eunice's palms were already above his head. That's right, the White Demon Constellation Guardian's ability was space restriction. Previously, when he blocked Vol's attack, it was the space constancy ability that gave him enough time to react. But now it was the space contraction ability of space restriction. In an instant, the space was completely contracted, and the surrounding air seemed to have been sucked out. It was extremely difficult for Vol to even raise his hand, let alone dodge. Seeing this scene and feeling the energy undulations in the field, the Zodiac Guardian warriors could not help but feel nervous. Only Chi Yu's gaze remained calm. Vol's eyes lit up. A gray light shot out from his eyes, and his fat body directly sat down on the ground. Space contraction also had its limits, and in the face of absolute power, it was impossible to do anything. If Eunice used space contraction with all his strength, Vol was obviously unable to move, but as long as he released his energy to attack, it would be impossible to completely restrict Vol's body. Vol's body sat back, and although his movement was slow, he managed to raise his arms in the shortest time possible. It was his hands that were raised into the air. Following that, a strange scene appeared. Like a flower blooming, Vol's slender hands transformed into countless light shadows in the air, and every light shadow entangled with each other. Every finger had a different function. Eunice's attack was extremely powerful, and the huge pressure from the space made him feel like 1,000-pound gate pressing down. But Vol's 10 fingers alternated, and every finger brought out a completely different energy. There was a direct attack, there was a suction force, there was a spiral force. There was also a contraction force. The different energies were not released by his body, but were completely controlled by the energy on his fingers, causing the thundercloud force in his body to completely explode at that distance. This was the true ability of the Rat Zodiac warrior. It was all in his hands. The ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air could be heard continuously, and Eunice, who was falling from the sky, stopped. Vol's hands were constantly transforming into different energy attacks, and almost every finger force had an effect on him. At the beginning, those finger forces were obviously not strong enough, and he could completely resist them by relying on his whole body's downward pressure. However, as the finger forces continued to be compressed and overlapped under his palms, Eunice's body suddenly stopped moving. The effects of the different types of energy were completely displayed. Right now, not only was his hands unable to exert any more pressure, what made him even more shocked was that the energy fluctuations from Vol's hands actually rushed into his body again and again, starting to invade his meridians. That strange energy attack caused Eunice to be flustered even though he had enough energy. With no other choice, he could only bounce back and float away from the attack range of Vol's hands. However, it was also because of this that the space restriction on Vol disappeared. Vol's body was originally sitting backward, and as soon as the space restriction disappeared, he immediately fell backward, his body rolling on the ground like a rubber ball. When he was still in a squatting position, his body bounced up like a cannonball, and he let out a shrill scream. Gray hair gushed out from his body, and the 3-inch nails on his hands quickly extended to 6 inches, flashing with a terrifying metallic light. He directly pounced towards Eunice, who was falling from the sky. Vol, whose speed had suddenly doubled, caused Eunice to turn pale with fright. He understood that this was most likely the Zodiac Guardian warrior's origin mutation ability. That's right, what Vol was displaying now was the first stage of origin mutation. Yumu, who was watching the battle, could not help but be shocked. She had seen Vol before. Back at the Chongqing Temple, Vol was still the weakest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, and could not display any attack power at all. However, the current field mouse had completely become a valiant warrior. His hands had a strange attacking power, although it did not have a strong energy, but the strange attacking method had already made up for the difference in energy between him and Eunice of the White Demon constellation. Vol's thundercloud force was now at the 6-cloud level, which was slightly stronger than Yan Xiaoyi, who was at the 6-cloud level at the same time. This was because he had put in more effort. Eunice had no choice but to calm down. Facing this opponent, he no longer dared to have the slightest contempt. Space paused once again, causing Vol's attack to slow down slightly. Using this moment, Yuna's body flashed in the air and actually changed the direction of his fall. With both feet in front and back, he pointed towards Vol's head. Movement techniques were the least of Vol's strengths. On the contrary, it was what Yuna's was best at. Space energy did not have much effect on Vol's attack, because Vol's strange hands could completely break through the space blockade with all kinds of attack method. Since that was the case, Yuna's decided to use his strength to attack his enemy's weakness. Relying on his fast movement techniques, he launched a frenzied attack towards Vol. Vol's body that was charging forward suddenly stopped. He raised both hands and collided with Yuna's. Yuna's was attacking from above, so he had the advantage of strength. Moreover, from a pure energy point of view, Vol was indeed slightly inferior to him. However, at this time, Vol had already completed the first stage of origin mutation, so he was not at a disadvantage. Yuna's was bounced up, while Vol's feet sank by an inch. Neither of their attacks had any effect. Yuna's blitzkrieg began. He no longer clashed head-on with Vol. Relying on his fast movement techniques, he began to circle around Vol's body, his palms flying up and down. Every time he attacked, there would be a powerful energy fluctuation. Relying on his fast movement skills, he could often appear in the blind spots where the Vol was the most difficult to rescue. He would send out a palm strike, and as soon as the energy was released, he would immediately move to another position. In his opinion, the Vol's movement skills were far inferior to his, so it would definitely be exhausted to deal with him. It wouldn't take long. Naturally, he would admit defeat. However, when Yuna's really began to attack like this, he soon discovered to his shock that, in front of Vol, his blitzkrieg actually had no effect at all. Vol, whose feet had sunk by an inch, had not moved in the slightest from the moment his opponent's blitzkrieg began. He did not even turn around. The bones in his arms crackled, and his originally thick arms suddenly lengthened by half a foot. At the same time, his bones seemed to have become several times softer. No matter where Yuna's attack came from, it would always be met with his palms swinging from inconceivable angles. What met him was always Field Mouse's palms, which were swung out from inconceivable angles. Field Mouse's 10 fingers were constantly moving like butterflies, and all kinds of different energies easily broke Yuna's attack. For a moment, Field Mouse's hands were constantly flying around his body. His fat body was actually surrounded by the shadows of his palms, like a big hedgehog. Where was Yuna's? Where was his sharp fingernails? Tyrannical energy waves constantly collided in the air, causing the snowflakes on the ground to surge continuously. Vol's calmness was naturally not innate. During the era of the ancient behemoths, among the Zodiac guardian warriors, Vol was undoubtedly the one who had been close to death the most times. It was not because of his lack of strength, but because he would always appear by Modi's side regardless of his own safety. Since agreeing to Mo Dan's original conditions, Vol became much quieter than before. Although Chi Yu could also see it, Chi Yu had too many things to do, and did not have too much time to care about his good brother. However, silence did not mean decadence. Although he did not say anything, Vol's chubby body would always appear by Modi's side at the most critical moment, especially when Modi was in danger. His body was almost like a shield beside Modi. If he could not maintain a calm state of mind and try to minimize the damage he received, perhaps he would have died many times. Even so, Vol had narrowly escaped death several times. Modi's heart softened a long time ago. Perhaps because they had been together for a long time, Vol had undergone drastic changes in her eyes. He was no longer a child much younger than her. Whenever Vol appeared by her side, she always felt extremely safe. When Vol agreed to Emodan that day, Modi's heart was full of strange feelings. After the ancient behemoth era, when Vol often appeared by her side without hesitation, Modi's heart finally melted like an iceberg and turned into a pool of spring water. Although she did not officially admit anything, the reason why Emodan did not pester Vol until now was because the night before they left the ancient behemoth era, Modi had found her and had a deep and sincere talk. As for what they said between them, no one knew. However, after returning from the ancient behemoth era, when he went home to visit his family, Modi once went to Vol's house. From that time on, a smile appeared on Vol's face again, and the way he looked at Modi became more gentle. All of this could be said to be a secret between Vol and Modi. Even Chi-Yu did not have the time to know. At this time, Vol was so heavy that it was scary. After a long period of training, he had already developed a keen sense. A mouse's sense was always very keen. A real mouse, in order to avoid countless possible dangers, if it didn't have a keen sense, how could it survive? And this keen sense had been magnified countless times by Vol. The speed of the battle between the two became faster and faster. However, Vol was faster with his hands, while Eunice was faster with his body movement. In terms of energy consumption, it was obvious that Eunice, who was constantly moving, was at a disadvantage. The energy gap between him and Vol was constantly shrinking. Eunice knew that if this continued, then the final result would be difficult to predict. He might even be defeated by this young fatso. His depth was really too scary. With a final palm strike, Eunice's body suddenly retreated. A white light shot up to the sky. Before his energy consumption was over, he was ready for a decisive battle. Vol still did not move. Eunice's aura was very unstable. However, Vol's hands also had a strong numbing sensation. In terms of energy intensity, he was not as strong as his opponent. Although he had blocked the opponent's attack, the energy shock caused him to have to take a breather. The originally bright sky suddenly became a lot dimmer. However, the clouds in the sky had quietly disappeared. Bright stars appeared in the sky. The starlight flickered, outlining the shape of a ghost. That's right, that was the constellation that Eunice represented, White Thief. Starlight burst out. The white light condensed into a huge beam of light that instantly shone on the body of White Thief constellation's guardian Eunice. The amount of starlight that formed the White Thief constellation shone on every part of his body. At this time, Eunice's energy aura suddenly became different. Formless white energy condensed on the surface of his skin, forming a special layer of energy protection. At the same time, the energy aura on his body rose to an unprecedented intensity. The undulations in the space also became more and more intense. A faint light flickered. Both of his hands had already stretched out to his side. From the looks of it, he looked like a white cross. Vol took a deep breath. He knew that the opponent was currently accumulating energy. Just like his own origin transformation, the opponent was using the constellation protection. He used the White Thief constellation's energy to inject into his body, causing his energy to rise to its peak state in a short period of time. You know it, why can't I? The gray fur grew once again. However, this time, Vol's entire body shone with a metallic luster. His originally short and stout body suddenly swelled to a height of 2 m. He had a stocky back and a stocky waist. Especially the muscles on his arms, they looked like small mountains that were gathered together. The gray fur extended from his head all the way to his back, and then all the way to the ground. Vol's arms that were filled with bulging muscles trembled slightly. He looked up to the sky and let out an intense roar. Suddenly, a gray shadow appeared behind him out of thin air. It was the light shadow of the rat Zodiac. Although his body had become extremely strong, at this time, Vol's eyes shone with the light of wisdom. Chi Yu once said in Greece that the 12 zodiac were divided into 6 pairs. Each pair had its own special meaning. The first pair was the rat and the cow, and the rat represented wisdom. Vol, who had completed the second origin transformation, had also opened the door of wisdom. Both of his fingers stretched out 10 inches long claws. Gray energy surrounded his body. Looking at him now, he looked more like a miniature version of the behemoth in the Western legends. Vol's transformation once again shocked the constellation guardians. Through Yamu's understanding of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, they all knew that being able to undergo 2 origin transformations meant that the strength of the Zodiac Guardian warriors had reached another realm. The rat Zodiac warrior in front of them was obviously not the strongest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Even he could reach the second origin transformation. Then, how strong would the other Zodiac Guardian warriors be? Chi Yu's eyes flashed with a fiery light. He kept shouting in his heart, "Vol, good job. Kill him." At this time, his blood was boiling because of the battle. He couldn't wait to fight with Yamu right now. Vol stretched his arms with his shoulders as the axis. Revealing his solid and broad chest, he let out a fiery roar, as if he was demonstrating his power to the other party. The tyrannical energy fluctuations caused the Vol's body to tremble unceasingly. Every time he trembled, the energy fluctuations on his body would increase a bit, especially the gray sharp blades on his 10 fingers, the metallic luster becoming more and more obvious. The battle between the rat Zodiac warrior and the white tortoise constellation had finally begun. Feeling the huge amount of energy rising from them, no one would believe that they were going to stop this battle. Vol moved first. It was still his hands that moved. With the movement of his thick and strong arms, his 10 fingers trembled in the air. Letting out a buzzing sound, 10 rays of gray metallic aura like sharp blades flew towards Jonas, who was still absorbing the energy of the constellation. "Dimension!" Jonas bellowed. His hands suddenly crossed in front of him. The constellation light spots on his body lit up at the same time. Countless white light auras gathered on his hands. His palms were like blades. He waved them gently. A crack suddenly appeared in the space in front of him. The 10 rays of metallic gray energy light didn't have any offensive effect at all. They were sucked in by the spatial cracks that suddenly appeared. The crack stuck onto Jonas's hands. He fiercely swung his arms up. After the crack, a large amount of white light aura condensed, and the crack became the sharpness of the white light. The strongest profound technique of the white tortoise constellation guardian, white tortoise dimension / had appeared. Since the start of the battle, Jonas was very clear. It was impossible for him to defeat the rat Zodiac warrior in front of him with just his skills. Although he didn't have a nimble body technique, his unparalleled hands made up for all his flaws. No skill would have a good result in front of him. Only by relying on the advantage in energy could he obtain the final victory. White tortoise constellation's ultimate profound technique caused space to tear. It was not something that the previous spatial restriction could compare to. Concentrating all his energy into one strike, the outcome of the battle was completely condensed into one strike. The gigantic light / pounced forward, the energy ripple from the space tearing had completely locked onto Vol's body. Vol knew that other than fighting head-on, he had no other choice. Without any hesitation, the second stage of the innate transformation brought about a large amount of energy, causing Vol to be filled with confidence. The gray energy aura condensed in his body, and the enormous energy ripple exploded at that moment. The gray light aura instantly engulfed every inch of Vol's body. His body actually floated in the air. He stretched out both of his hands, and 10 rays of gray light suddenly bloomed. The nails on his 10 fingers actually became 10 sharp blades that were over a foot long. Both of his hands crossed in front of his body at the same time. The 10 fingers maintained different rhythmic ripples, and the gray energy continued to change in front of him. In the midst of the energy changes, the enormous energy ripple started to spread in front of him. Seeing the white light slash coming down from the sky, Vol suddenly raised his upper body, and the gray light aura suddenly blossomed. Following the rhythm of his 10 fingers, the gray ripples were like a bunch of blooming flowers, forming a gray energy about a foot wide that floated up. Compared to Bai Chang's dimensional slash, the energy unleashed by Vol was not as powerful. However, the gray light that was emitted from his hands looked crystal clear. The reason why there was no energy explosion was simple. It was because under Qi Yu's guidance, every Zodiac Guardian God warrior knew that they had to use all their energy on their attacks, and not just look strong. Vol remembered every word that Qi Yu said very clearly. At this moment, what Vol was using was also his strongest attack at the moment, the Rat King's wave stacking hands. The energy light that was like a ripple in the air was like a wave, and it swept up continuously towards the gap that Bai Chang's dimensional slash had created. A strange scene appeared. The goal of Bai Chong Constellation Guardian Yunas was to expand the gap that the dimensional slash had created. What was strange was that what Vol was doing was using the energy that erupted from his miraculous hands to forcefully close the gap that the dimensional slash had created. In an instant, the white and gray energies intertwined in the air. It was not a collision, but it was much more dangerous than a collision. Regardless of whether it was Qi Yu's side or Yamu's side, they could not help but feel nervous. The first battle was very important to both sides. No matter which side won, they would be able to gain the upper hand in the battle against their opponent. After all, whichever side won 6 battles first would be undefeatable. As the energy undulations were too intense, the surroundings of the surging energy aura had already started to distort. Not only was the space created by the dimensional slash torn apart, but the surrounding space had also started to crack. The flag cloud on the peak of Mount Everest was actually being rapidly absorbed by the small cracks that had appeared, causing the air on the world's highest peak to become even thinner. Vol and Yunas maintained a deadlock. From the looks of their energy, Yunas had a slight advantage. However, in the previous battle, he had consumed more energy than Vol. Furthermore, Vol's body had been modified by Qi Yu's nature source. Compared to Yunas, he still had an advantage. Although the torn space made his body feel extremely uncomfortable, he could still endure it. Hence, at this moment, the two of them were actually evenly matched. Whichever side's energy was exhausted first, then. Whichever side's energy was the final loser. If the two people's energy was too close, when their energy was exhausted at the same time, then the dimensional slash would also appear. However, at that time, it would not be something that Yunas could control. Who knows, it might even devour both of their bodies at the same time. Qi Yu's gaze gradually revealed a trace of anxiety. Even if he lost the first battle, he did not wish for Vol to be harmed in any way. On the other side, Yamu's delicate brows were also slightly furrowed. She knew Yunas very well. Although Yunas's expression seemed to be relaxed, the more he was like this, the more difficult it was for him to handle. When a constellation guardian used its constellation protection, there was a certain time limit. It could not be used endlessly, and Bai Chang's dimensional slash consumed a lot of Yuna's energy. Yamu also did not know how long Vol's origin mutation could last. At this moment, her confidence in Yunas was gradually disappearing. What made the spectators' breathing become more and more rapid was that, be it Vol or Yunas, in this deadlock of energy attacks, the degree of energy consumption was actually very similar. Neither of them could make the other consume more energy. Looking at their increasingly strained expressions, the smart people could already tell that this battle would most likely end in a lose-lose situation. Both of them had gathered such a large amount of energy. If both of them were to lose in the end, perhaps it would be too difficult for them to survive. Modi quietly came to Qi Yu's side and anxiously transmitted his voice to him. Qi Yu, what should we do? I'm afraid that Vol can't hold on for much longer. I know what he is thinking. No matter what, He will not admit defeat in this battle today. He is your good brother, Chi-Yu. Of course, Chi-Yu knew what Modi wanted to say. He was also very happy to see Modi's concern for Vol. He lightly nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will not let my good brother be harmed in the slightest." As he said that, he had already walked out from his own camp. His gaze focused in Yamu's direction. Through the fluctuations of his mental power, he immediately made Yamu look at him. "Miss Yamu, you have seen the situation before you. If this continues, I am afraid that the result will be a lose-lose situation for both Vol and your Yunus. Why don't we call this a draw? You and I do not wish for our comrades to be injured, right?" Although Chi-Yu's tone was much gentler than before, his unfamiliar way of addressing her still made Yamu's heart ache. However, it was clear that Yamu had already recognized the same problem. She nodded and said, "This is also what I wanted to say. Let us end this battle." "Boss, don't, I can definitely defeat this guy." Vol heard Chi-Yu and Yamu's words and hurriedly interrupted them. Because he was distracted, his energy was immediately suppressed by Yunus, and it seemed even more strenuous for him. Chi-Yu's expression darkened. "Are you the boss or am I the boss? Don't mess around. You have already done very well. Miss Yamu, let us do it together." The two looked at each other. Although their relationship had long been irreconcilable, they had after all been together for a long time. They very tacitly floated up at the same time and pounced towards their comrades. Chi-Yu's palm and Yamu struck Vol's and Yunus's back almost at the same time. Vol felt a gentle energy rush into his body from his back, and the cracks in the sky were immediately forcibly closed by the energy he constantly emitted. On the other hand, on Yamu's side, Yamu's holy aura was also transmitted through Yunus's body, blocking Vol's attack power. At the same time, it also dispelled Yunus's white demonic dimension / The two's energies collided one last time, but this time, it was no longer a battle between the rat Zodiac and the white demonic constellation. Instead, it was a battle between Chi-Yu and Yamu through their bodies. The four of them trembled at the same time. Chi-Yu and Yamu's gazes met in the air. In terms of energy undulations, the two of them were actually not much different. Although they had not used their full strength, they were both aware of their opponent's strength at the same time. Feeling Yamu's holy energy that was as vast as the Aegean Sea, Chi-Yu could not help but be shocked. What a good Yamu! The real goddess Athena's divine power was indeed different. Compared to himself, her energy seemed to be broader and more profound. This was probably the so-called divine power. Yamu was even more surprised than Chi-Yu. Last time, Chi-Yu was seriously injured and almost lost his life. She had even completely absorbed the origin of nature. At this time, not only did Yamu discover that Chi-Yu's energy was recovering, but at the same time, she also discovered that Chi-Yu's origin of nature had actually recovered, and was much stronger than before. She knew that the final outcome of today's battle would probably be decided between her and Chi-Yu. No matter what the previous situation was, Chi-Yu would definitely not let her go. Chi-Yu glared at Yamu fiercely, and returned to his team with Vol. When the twisted energy between them disappeared, Vol's origin mutation disappeared, and he returned to his original appearance. Most of his clothes were torn, but fortunately Chi-Yu was prepared. He took out a large coat from the Kongtong seal and put it on Vol. On the other side, Yunus was not much stronger than Vol. He also deactivated the constellation protection with a pale face. He panted heavily, and the excessive energy consumption made him unable to speak. In fact, he knew that if he continued, he might be the one to lose in the end. Only the two parties in a real battle would understand each other's situation. Although they were evenly matched at the beginning, Vol's energy recovery speed was obviously a little faster than his. Although it was only a very small difference, as time passed, this gap would gradually increase. However, Yunus was confident that when Vol defeated him and destroyed him, he would drag Vol down with him. However, in terms of the battle itself, He was only slightly inferior to Vol. Chapter 262. Chi-Yu patted Vol's shoulder, and the gentle energy of the source of nature helped him organize the energy in his body. He said in a deep voice, Vol, don't forget, you are not only a Zodiac guardian warrior, but also my good brother. You still have a lot of things to do. As your big brother, even if you can win in the end, I can't let you take the risk. If I lose a good brother like you, how can I explain it to your parents and myself? Don't worry, we will all work hard. Although you didn't win this round, you didn't lose to your opponent either. Emodan interjected, That's right, Vol, don't worry. I'll be the next one, I'll help you win. As she said that, she had already jumped out impatiently. If one were to say who had changed the most during the ancient Almighty Beast era's training, it would definitely be Emodan. Not only had her strength increased by leaps and bounds, but her appearance had also undergone earth-shattering changes. Her height was about the same as Vol's, about 1.65 meters. Although this figure was not considered tall among girls, it was very well proportioned. It was just that her previous figure was a bit more exaggerated than Vol's, so she looked like a globe. But now, after the baptism of the ancient behemoth period, Emodan seemed to have changed into a different person. Her original figure had disappeared, and now she was only half of her previous size. Although she was still not slim, she was at most plump and smooth. At the same time, because she was used to the primitive life of the ancient behemoth period, the heavy makeup on her face had disappeared. After returning from the ancient behemoth period, Emodan changed into a fresh set of clothes. Everyone was surprised to find that the Zodiac had turned into a very delicate girl. Although her figure was still slightly plump, she was many times cuter than before. She could be considered a little beauty. Seeing everyone's surprise, Emodan was obviously very excited, and her attitude towards Chi-Yu had also changed fundamentally. To a girl, it was important to increase her strength, but to be able to make herself beautiful was even more important than increasing her strength. Therefore, although Emodan had suffered a lot during the era of the ancient beasts, she was still very excited to be ordered to lose weight to this extent in that kind of environment. She had secretly decided that she must be as slim as Modi in the future. However, looking at Emodan, Vol couldn't be happy. His weight didn't change much despite the same amount of exercise. Fortunately, Emodan didn't pester him anymore. Emodan's figure and appearance had changed a lot. However, his temper did not change. He was still as fiery as before. Floating out, he directly hooked his finger at the guardians and said, Who wants to come? Let me teach you a lesson. Yumo had never seen Emodan before, and seeing her arrogant look, he could not help but look at her curiously, and said indifferently, Taurus constellation's Long Gu will fight. Long Ji's figure could be said to be the tallest out of all the guardians. Hearing Yumu's order, he could not help but hesitate and said, Miss, can you change to someone else? I don't want to bully a little girl. Emodan was the youngest out of all the Zodiac guardian warriors. She was not as fat as before and looked like a little girl. After all, she was not even 17 years old. F*CK, you're looking down on me. Emodan angrily raised her head and stared at Long Gu. With her height, she could only look at her opponent like this. Yumu frowned slightly. She did not make a sound, but pointed the victory goddess staff in her hand forward slightly, indicating that Long Gu would carry out her order. The other guardians could not help but curse Long Gu in their hearts. You don't want to fight against a little girl, but do you think we want to? Winning was something to be expected, but if we lose, wouldn't we lose face? Long Gu helplessly walked out from the group of guardians. He lowered his head and looked at Emodan, whose height was about the same as his stomach. He tried to make his voice as gentle as possible and said, Little girl, why don't you just admit defeat? Later, Uncle will buy sweets for you. As the Taurus constellation's guardian, his thoughts were very pure. Among the guardians, he had always listened to Mephisto's orders, and Mo Dan's round and smooth appearance was exactly the type he liked. At that moment, he was unable to do anything to the delicate little girl in front of him. Mo Dan puffed out her chest. After she slimmed down, the smallest change was the pair of breasts, and they still looked to be of high quality. "Big guy, if I don't teach you a lesson today, I will not be in different green robes. Watch my move." As she said that, she suddenly jumped up. A green light flashed on her head, and two thick bull horns appeared on top of her head, and went straight for Long Gulong's chin. Although Long Gulong was a straightforward person, he was very talented in battle, and could be said to be one of the main leaders among the Guardians. Once he felt something was wrong, he immediately took a step back, and at the same time, he pressed down with both hands, and directly grabbed the horns on Mo Dan's head. If Mo Dan was so easy to deal with, then she would not be Mo Dan. The horns suddenly disappeared, and her eyes instantly turned blood red. A tyrannical energy suddenly appeared on her fists, and she directly punched towards the opponent's chest. It must be known that although she was slightly inferior to Vol, but she had just risen to the 6 cloud level before coming here. Long Gu could clearly feel two balls of terrifying power gathering in front of his chest. He was not prepared previously, and in his helplessness, he could only increase the speed of his grabbing hands. At the same time, he took another step back, and widened the distance between him and Mo Dan. What was the special ability of the Bull Zodiac? The answer was none. The Bull Zodiac warrior was the one with the most average battle power among all the Guardian warriors. Perhaps it was the calmness of the Bull. In all aspects of battle power, although Mo Dan was not the strongest, she did not have any obvious flaws. With a loud bang, her body was blasted away by Long Gu like a cannonball. She shrank in the air and borrowed the force to fly away. When she landed on the ground, she had already returned to her own side. Long Gulong's eyes revealed a trace of anger. Although he had blasted away Mo Dan, there were now 2 more wounds on his shoulders. Blood flowed out, and it looked somewhat scary. As it turned out, when Mo Dan had been blocked by him, the 2 horns that had previously grown out from the top of his head had actually extended out from his forehead. The horns grew in a direction and were slightly curved forward, perfectly piercing into Jugger Dragon C's shoulders. If not for the fact that his energy was strong enough to push Mo Dan away, perhaps Mo Dan would have destroyed both of his fans at this moment. Despicable, too despicable. Long Gu roared angrily, and his eyes turned red. Mo Dan was slightly panting. She was also shocked. Previously, when she saw Vol fighting against the Constellation Guardian, it did not seem to be too difficult. But why was the energy of this big guy that she was fighting against so strong? The Taurus constellation of the Constellation Guardians. There was only one ability, and that was power. Absolute power. That was why Mo Dan was at a disadvantage. If it was Vol fighting against Long Gu, he might still have a chance. He could use the ingenious changes in his hands to attack, but Mo Dan's ability was balance. Balance in all aspects. Thus, facing the absolute power of the Taurus constellation, he was countered by the opponent. Chi Yu's gaze was naturally sharp. He knew, even if Mo Dan used the second stage of origin mutation, he was still not the opponent of the Taurus constellation. He was already so strong without using the Constellation Guardian. If he used it, then, his power would definitely reach a terrifying level. He grabbed onto Mo Dan's shoulders and said, "We admit defeat for the second round." "Boss, why? I haven't even mutated?" Mo Dan said unhappily. Chi Yu looked at her gently and said, "You have already tried your best. It is not that your strength is not enough, but your balanced strength is countered by the opponent. You have already gained an advantage, so just forget it. Believe in your other comrades. They will help you win this round." There was another reason why he did not let Mo Dan continue fighting. After being injured, Long Gu was obviously in a state of mineralization. His entire body was swelling, and his huge killing intent made him look like a fierce god. Chi-Yu could not let Emodan risk her life to continue fighting when he clearly knew that she was not his opponent. The milky white light of the victory goddess scepter landed on Long Gulong Ji's head. The holy aura engulfed his entire body and immediately suppressed his fierce aura. Mephisto came out and forcefully pulled Long Gulong back. Yamu nodded at Chi-Yu and said, "Now our victory is 1. 5 and yours is 0. 5. Chi-Yu nodded. Continue. Zodiac Tiger, fight. The Zodiac Tiger warrior was Su Dong. Among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, other than Chi-Yu, there were only 3 who had reached the 8-Cloud realm. They were Ru, who became the first Zodiac Guardian warrior, Su Dong, and Ming Ming, who was influenced by Chi-Yu's Kirin blood meridians. As one of the 3 8-Cloud warriors, Chi-Yu had high hopes for Su Dong. And Su Dong's opponent for this battle was the Gemini constellation guardian Shin Yun, who was also known as Yu Yun. Before Su Dong went into battle, Chi-Yu transmitted a message to him: Shui Xian's spiritual undulation. The Gemini constellation guardian's main ability is the psionic storm. Guard your heart and finish the battle as soon as possible. Su Dong nodded gently and floated out. He had already arrived at the center of Mount Everest. Yu Yun, who looked exactly like Yamu, floated out. Although she had changed back to her original appearance, she could still recognize Su Dong. She nodded at Su Dong and said, "Please." Su Dong naturally knew about the grudge between Chi-Yu and Yamu. He looked at Yu Yun, then looked at Yamu and laughed bitterly. "Why did you do this? We were supposed to be friends." Yu Yun's expression was still calm. She said plainly, "Everything is in the past and nothing can be changed. We are now opponents, not friends. Let's fight." As she said that, the light aura on her body actually lit up, and the big box that belonged to her in her original formation also opened at the same time. The light aura flickered, and the sky once again darkened, just that, this time, it was the Gemini constellation of the 12 ecliptic palaces that appeared. Seeing Yu Yun's transformation, Su Dong couldn't help but be shocked. His opponent had used the constellation guardian right from the start. How was she going to fight him? Not daring to be careless, Su Dong extended his body and also used his own zodiac transformation. To be safe, he only used the first stage. A huge tiger's wing appeared on his back. Su Dong soared into the sky and directly rose to a height of about 10 meters. After flying, Su Dong realized that the air was very thin at an altitude of more than 8,000 meters above sea level. The energy required to fly was much higher than usual. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. It wouldn't be so easy to win this battle. Yu Yun's constellation guardian was completed very quickly. Her body lit up with a golden light, and her entire body also became illusory in the golden light. Faint light flickered and golden light flowed. Although she couldn't fly, the golden light that was released from her body shot into the sky. Before Su Dong could react, it had already enveloped his body. Seeing this scene, Chi-Yu couldn't help but be shocked. Beside him, Ryua had already cried out, "Domain!" This was a situation that no one had expected. Yu Yun could actually use the power of a domain. Actually, what Chi-Yu and the rest didn't know was that, among the 12 constellation guardians, the strongest was no longer Mephistopheles, but Yu Yun. It must be known that before she truly became the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation, Yu Yun's spiritual tempest was already very powerful. And when she and Yamu returned to Greece, and became the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation, she naturally obtained her own constellation guardian. After this period of fusion, her strength had a qualitative leap again. She was definitely the strongest among the constellation guardians. And only she could use the power of a domain. Their original plan to win this battle had changed. Immediately, Chi-Yu's face turned ugly. He also didn't know whether Su Dong could win in his opponent's domain. Everything depended on what Yu Yun's domain power was. A faint light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes as he stared nervously at the golden light in the sky. The golden light condensed in the sky, and Yu Yun's figure disappeared. A low and dignified tiger's roar sounded from the golden light. The golden light fluctuated for a moment, but quickly returned to normal. Su Dong was really depressed. When his body was enveloped by the golden light, he could clearly feel a special energy wave wrapping around his body. As he had used the Zodiac protection domain with Chi Yu, he naturally knew that Yu Yun in front of him was using a domain. His opponent could use a domain, which was a huge threat to him. Without hesitation, he immediately activated his Tiger's Roar ability. The huge Tiger Thundercloud force surged out under his command. He hoped that through the Tiger's Roar, Yu Yun would lose control of her own ability and break the domain in front of him. But obviously, Su Dong's idea couldn't be realized. Yu Yun's mental strength was extremely strong. Even if it couldn't compare to Chi Yu's overall strength, her attack power was even stronger than Chi Yu's. Although the Tiger's Roar had a certain impact, it was far from enough to destroy her domain. Su Dong quickly understood what the Gemini domain was. With a flash of light, Yu Yun appeared in front of him. Just as Su Dong was about to attack, Yu Yun smiled at him charmingly. Su Dong only felt his vision blurring. Subconsciously, his hand movements slowed down. The mental shock wave attacked his body from all directions under the effect of the domain. The psionic storm was magnified by the Gemini domain. It was completely different from normal attacks. It was also Su Dong's first time facing an attack like this. Even though he wanted to resist, how could he do so in Yu Yun's domain? Yu Yun's main ability was her mental strength. She was very smart. She didn't want to attack Su Dong in any other form. From the fact that Su Dong wasn't completely controlled by her psionic storm, she could tell how strong the enemy in front of her was. Once Su Dong woke up, she would definitely not be his opponent. Therefore, Yu Yun threw herself into controlling her mental strength. The attacks of the psionic storm were stronger than the ones before, constantly attacking Su Dong's brain. At this time, the competition between the two had become a silent battle. But the danger was no less than the previous two battles. Before coming here, Yu Yun had already decided that she must do her best to help her sister win this battle. She knew that if Yama won in the end, with her current attitude towards Chi Yu, she would never hurt Chi Yu again. However, if the Zodiac Guardian warriors were to emerge victorious, it would be a devastating blow to the Greek Guardians. At the very least, Chi Yu would never let Yama go. After a period of quiet cultivation, Yu Yun's ambition had completely disappeared. Yama was her only family in this world. She really didn't want to see another tragedy happen because of her previous mistake. No one knew how the battle between the two people inside the domain was going. Everyone was anxiously waiting for the final result. Everyone's eyes were focused on the golden light. Now, Chi Yu hoped that Yu Yun wouldn't have enough energy to maintain the domain for too long, giving Su Dong a chance to counterattack. After all, in terms of combat power, Su Dong was much stronger than Yu Yun. Actually, Su Dong had been tricked since the beginning of the competition. As soon as Yu Yun appeared, he immediately used his constellation protection, which made Su Dong shocked. Yu Yun also knew that Chi Yu would definitely tell Su Dong about her spiritual storm ability. And from Yamu, she also knew that Su Dong was a winged tiger with the ability to fly. After knowing her ability, he would definitely choose to fly first to increase the distance between them. This would make it more difficult for her to use her spiritual power attack, and also reduce the power of the spiritual storm. She was waiting for Su Dong to fly. Actually, if Su Dong didn't choose to fly and attacked Yu Yun immediately, Yu Yun, who had just gained the domain ability, would probably be defeated. Victory and defeat were often decided in a split second. For example, the battle between Yu Yun and Su Dong was actually a question of who would make the first move. Whoever used their advantage to counter the opponent's disadvantage, then the rest of the battle would be much simpler. Of course, even if Su Dong came to his senses now, it would be too late. After all, he was completely sealed by the Gemini domain and the spiritual storm. Even Qi Yu had never seen Yu Yun's flying ability before, let alone him. At this point in the battle, there was no longer any suspense. The golden domain did not last for too long, but when it disappeared, the battle was already over. With the support of Yu Yun's energy, the unconscious Su Dong was sent back to the ground. Yu Yun floated down and nodded at Qi Yu, saying, "Thank you for letting me win." Qi Yu's expression was very ugly. He hadn't expected this defeat. Of course, he wouldn't blame Su Dong. Even if he was in Yu Yun's shoes, he would probably be at a disadvantage if he was suddenly attacked by Yu Yun. He hurriedly used his spiritual power to invade Su Dong's brain, waking him up from his coma. When Su Dong woke up, he was still immersed in the scene from before. Just as he was about to attack, he was pulled back by Qi Yu. Looking at the situation in front of him, Su Dong finally understood that he had lost. "Qi Yu, Su Dong looked at Qi Yu dejectedly. Qi Yu smiled faintly and said, "It's all right, it's not your fault. It was my underestimation of the opponent that led to this result. You should take a rest first. Being attacked by spiritual power can easily affect your emotions." He patted Su Dong's shoulder and gave him a determined look, telling him not to feel pain over the loss in front of him. The Zodiac Guardian warriors were silent. Although they wouldn't blame Su Dong, the situation in front of them was too disadvantageous for the Zodiac Guardian warriors. 3 battles, 2 losses and 1 draw. No one had expected this. The victory of 0.5 points versus 2.5 points had completely suppressed the Zodiac Guardian warriors. In the remaining 9 matches, the Zodiac Guardian God side could only lose 3 more matches at most. However, the Zodiac Guardian warriors in front of them were stronger than they had imagined. Could they really win more than 3 battles? Not to mention the Zodiac Guardian warriors, even Qi Yu didn't have the slightest confidence. However, the competition had already reached this point, and no one could regret it. Qi Yu nodded at Modi, and his eyes subconsciously revealed a bit of hope. No matter what, the Zodiac Guardian warriors couldn't afford to lose this battle. Vol had already recovered at this time, and her energy had recovered to at least half. She looked at Modi and said firmly, "You can do it." He said firmly, "You can do it. I'll be waiting for your victorious return. Take back the victory that I lost just now." Modi looked at Vol and smiled gently. He nodded lightly and said in a low voice, "If I win, I will be your girlfriend." Vol's heart trembled slightly, but Modi had already floated out and arrived at the center of the battlefield. Her opponent for this round was Cancer Cece of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Cece looked a little emotional. Back then, she had also rebelled together with Nimbus. Looking at the tall figure of Modi in front of her, she didn't say anything and directly launched an attack. Modi was an innate Zodiac Guardian warrior. Among all the Zodiac Guardians, her strength had always been ranked in the middle, but no one would underestimate her. The strength of 7 clouds was close to 8 clouds, which fully demonstrated her fighting ability. Except for Su Dong, who had lost inexplicably before. Among the 4 people who had already appeared, she was the strongest. Cece's attack was very simple. She moved her body horizontally. A huge energy wave had already wrapped around Modi's body like silk. From the way she attacked, she was a skillful fighter. Different from her, Modi's fighting style emphasized both skill and strength. Raising his right leg like lightning, he waved it in the air like a razor. An ear-piercing sound rang out, and an invisible energy suddenly appeared. Before Cece could react, the right side of the energy she sent out had already been torn apart by the energy of this kick. Modi moved. Her body brought out a string of afterimages in the air, her delicate body fluttered, and her entire body moved horizontally in the air. In a split second, she had actually unleashed 36 kicks, the afterimages of the kicks flickered, and the sharp sound of the air breaking interweaved into a death melody. Modi's attacks had always been like a torrential storm, and in the entire battle, she did not give Cece any chance. It was to the point that Cece did not even have the chance to use the constellation protection, and the battle had already ended. It was a battle without the constellation protection or innate mutation. Modi's attack speed was absolutely terrifying, and even Chi-Yu did not have the tyrannical attack speed that was like the wind. Under the countless of kicks, when Cece was kicked 3 times consecutively and was sent back to her own side, Yumu had already admitted defeat on her behalf. Although Cece did not unleash her full strength, but her energy had already suffered a violent shock, and her body was also injured from the kicks, so there was no meaning in continuing, and it would only be a waste of time. The battle had ended, and Modi returned to her side with a calm expression. When she passed by Chi-Yu, she heard Chi-Yu's voice. "Don't forget what you said to Vol just now." "Sister Modi, thank you." Modi looked at Chi-Yu, shook her head and said, "No, I should be the one thanking you. I have already thought it through, looks are not everything, and age is not the real difference. I'm afraid that in my entire life, I will never meet another person who will treat me as well as Vol. Since I have already met her, if I were to give up, I'm afraid I will regret it for the rest of my life. There is no such thing as medicine for regret in this world, so I have to seize my own happiness, don't you think so?" Chi-Yu smiled. The confirmation of the relationship between Modi and Vol had finally allowed him to put down the stone in his heart, and the battle in front of him had also moved a little from the disadvantageous position they were in earlier. He could not help but secretly heave a sigh of relief. At least, his side could finally equalize the battle. He had absolute confidence in the next battle, because the next one to appear was the strongest of the 12 Zodiac Guardians, the Zodiac Dragon Warrior, Ryue. Modi's holy power not only stopped the decline of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, but also greatly increased the morale of his own side. Ryue did not wait for Chi-Yu to speak, and had already floated out. No one knew better than her how much of a blow Chi-Yu had suffered. Chi-Yu's enemy was right in front of her, how could she not do her best to avenge her lover? Moreover, Wen Ting was also her good sister. Coldly sweeping her gaze across the Zodiac Guardians in front of her, a formless domineering aura was suddenly released from Ryue's body. Who's next? T-Rex's domineering aura was previously restrained for Chi-Yu, but at this moment, it was released for Chi-Yu. Every sip and peck, it was as though the heavens had already decided it. The handsome Ilyas slowly walked out from his side. Like Ryue, he was also a strong fighter among the Zodiac Guardians. As the Zodiac Guardian of the Leo constellation, his aura had always been filled with tyranny. Feeling the domineering aura from Chi-Yu's body, the battle intent in his heart suddenly rose to an unprecedented level. Facing an enemy, Ilyas would never retreat, because he had always been Goddess Athena's most loyal guardian. Golden energy surged out from Ilyas's body. He roared towards the sky, his arms exerted strength, and with him as the center, the ice beneath his feet immediately cracked. His bright eyes looked at Ryue and he said loudly, "Leo constellation Ilyas, experience." Ryue looked at him coldly, her emotions did not change because of Ilyas's tyrannical strength, and said coldly, "Zodiac Dragon Warrior, hi Ryue." With that said, Ryue had already moved. In an instant, her body had already appeared in front of Ilyas. Without any fancy or technique, she directly punched towards Ilyas's chest. Ilyas shouted again, and similarly punched out with his right fist, towards Ryue's fist. In the midst of the loud bang, Ryue did not move at all, but Ilyas staggered 3 steps back before he could stabilize himself. Feeling the subsequent energy waves from Ryue's tyrannical fist continuously invading his body, Ilyas's expression could not help but change. What a strong strength! When he first met Ryue, it was still in the Chongqing Temple. At that time, although he could see that Ryue was the strongest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, he did not expect that Ryue was actually strong to such an extent. The Cancer constellation Cece did not even have the ability to retaliate in front of Modi, and that already made him shocked. But now, he finally understood who was the strongest among the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors. Chapter 263. Ryua looked at Ilyas coldly. The flag of Mount Everest appeared once again, but this time, it appeared because of the dragon. The clouds followed the dragon, and when the white cloud blew past, a layer of crystal scales appeared on Ryua's body, and her beautiful face was also blocked by the white light. The first stage of the Zodiac Dragon Warrior, Origin Evolution, was completed. Ilyas's body attacked at the first moment. Every punch brought out a golden light. It was the perfect combination of speed and power. His fists were the claws of a lion, and also the strongest attack of the Leo constellation. The huge energy ripple caused the entire Mount Everest to tremble. Ryua also moved. She only had one way to deal with Ilyas's attack, and that was to meet force with force. The rumbling sounds continued to appear between the two of them. The milky white dragon chi on Ryua's body surged out. Every punch was condensed with tyrannical energy, and in the continuous collision, blood was already flowing out from Ilyas's mouth. Although the overall strength of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors might not be stronger than the Constellation Guardians, but among the 24 of them, the strongest was undoubtedly Ryua. She had already reached the 8-cloud realm, and her strength was completely raised to the peak. Even if she faced a 10,000-year level beast, she could still win, not to mention Ilyas in front of her. However, Ilyas did not retreat. As a proud lion, before he lost the ability to fight, he would never retreat. Boom! Ryua's condensed energy fist caused Ilyas's body to fly up. Even if it was only the first stage of the Origin Evolution, her strength was still much stronger than Ilyas. His body was sent flying in the air, and Ilyas spat out a mouthful of blood. With another roar, the constellation light on his body completely lit up. The golden light was like a flame burning around his body. The strong battle intent caused everyone to be moved. Ilyas! Yamu shouted. Her voice sounded obviously anxious. However, being anxious would not solve the problem. Ilyas did not seem to hear Yamu's voice at all. The golden flames on his body burned even more intensely. A hint of surprise appeared in Ryua's eyes. She looked at Ilyas and could not help but nod. She did not pursue him, allowing Ilyas to raise his strength to its peak. Good. For the sake of battle, you are willing to expend your essence and burn the energy in your body. You are a worthy opponent. Since that's the case, I'll use my strongest ability to defeat you and let you accept your defeat wholeheartedly. While speaking, the white light aura around Ryua's body became even denser. The dragon wings on his back unfurled, and Ryua had already flown into the air. Under the shocked gazes of all the constellation protectors, Ryua's body quickly spun in the air. The dragon scale on her body had already changed. Relying on her 8-cloud level strength, she instantly entered the second stage of Origin Mutation. But it was not over yet. When the white light completely enveloped Ryua's body, when Mount Everest's flag cloud enveloped her body, an incomparably loud dragon roar sounded out, as though it was piercing through space. The flag cloud spread out, and the sparkling white light filled the air. That gigantic body, those ruby-like eyes. It looked so powerful. That's right, it was Ryua's strongest attack, Divine Dragon Transformation. After reaching the 8-cloud level, using Divine Dragon Transformation was no longer a burden to Ryua. The tyrannical energy undulation caused her to directly raise her strength to the peak. Her body that had been modified countless times by Chi Yu's origin of nature had become even more tyrannical than before. The gigantic dragon body looked so real. Ilyas seemed to not see all of this. His entire body was burning with golden flames. He stomped heavily on the ground, leaving a 1-meter deep mark on the unmelting ice. In the next moment, his body was already high up in the air, and he punched towards the divine dragon that Ryua had transformed into. His fist was covered in golden flames, and all the energy in his body was condensed into this fist. The huge energy undulation seemed to have already burned Ilyas's life force. His eyes were opened to the maximum, and he watched as his attack engulfed Ryue's body. Divine Dragon transformation caused Ryue's originally tyrannical strength to suddenly double. Her huge body swayed in the air, and a thick dragon tail suddenly lashed out with surging energy. Like a huge whip, it heavily bombarded Ilyas's fist, and also bombarded his tenacious body. Boom! The sky and earth changed color, and Ryue's divine dragon body rotated in midair. The white light emitted from her body seemed to be even stronger, and her ruby-like eyes softened. After all, facing such a strong enemy, she ultimately did not kill. As an opponent, the guardian of the Leo constellation, Ilyas, was definitely worthy of respect. Ilyas's body drew a beautiful parabola in the air, and directly fell towards the mountain peak. The energy that he bombarded out was completely dispersed by Ryue's dragon tail. In the face of absolute power, no matter how strong his battle intent was, it could not produce a better effect. He was defeated. As the energy was dispersed, his body also suffered a huge injury, and he completely fell into a coma, unable to control his body. Of course, if not for Ryue's mercy, and the energy of the divine dragon transformation was completely unleashed, Ilyas would not have a body now. Yama waved the victory goddess scepter, and divine energy floated out, supporting Ilyas's body and pulling him back. When she saw Ilyas's golden face, her beautiful eyes could not help but reveal a trace of a complicated light. Ilyas was undoubtedly the most handsome of all the constellation guardians. Although he had never mentioned it before, but Yama was very clear of his love for her. But even the man she loved could not accept it, let alone Ilyas's love. She watched as he almost died for her. Yama's eyes could not help but tear up. A faint light emitted from the victory goddess scepter, and healed Ilyas's injuries. Ilyas's coma also remembered the anger of the constellation guardians. Almost at the same time, the 11 constellation guardians took a step forward, and stared angrily at Ryue, who was in the air. Ryue was not afraid, and a strong dragon aura spread out. Facing the opponent below, her ruby-like eyes revealed a trace of disdain. She was not afraid of being surrounded by the opponent. As a Zodiac dragon warrior, she was practically born to fight. The changes on the side of the constellation guardians also caused the Zodiac guardian warriors to change. Seeing that Ryue had obtained victory, the Zodiac guardian warriors could not help but have their morale raised, especially Su Dong, who had mysteriously lost just now. Almost at the first moment, he soared into the air and shouted, "What? You want a group battle? We will accompany you to the end." Yamu raised her hand, and stopped the angry constellation guardians. She said calmly, "Everyone, do not act rashly, everything will proceed according to the agreement." Lady Ryue had already shown mercy just now. I did not expect that there would be such a strong existence among the Zodiac guardian warriors. Now we have already fought to a draw, both of us have 5 wins. Ryue saw that the opponent would not attack as a group. She transformed back to her original form, looked deeply at Yamu, and said indifferently, "I also did not expect it. The dignified goddess Athena's successor is actually a despicable person who only knows how to deceive others." Hearing Ryue's words, Yamu's face could not help but change, looking somewhat pale. The constellation guardians that she had just stopped were about to riot again. In a moment, the peak of Mount Everest was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Yamu paused the goddess of victory's scepter in her hand, and said in a deep voice, "The 6th match, Virgo Lyumides." Lyumides did not wait for Yamu to finish, and had already floated out. Although he was angry, but he still gave people a gentle and beautiful feeling. If one were to say that the males of the constellation guardians were handsome and not handsome, then, even Ilyas would not be able to compare to him. It was just that, he was really too feminine. So it's a beauty. Good, I like beauties the most, old whose luck is still good. Hu Guang swayed as he walked out from his own camp. His eyesight was not very good, if not he would not need such thick glasses. Furthermore, Lyumedes was indeed very feminine, so he really treated the Virgo constellation guardian in front of him as a beauty. Lyumedes was furious. I hate it when people say that I am a woman. Look clearly, I am the same as you, we are both men. Hu Guang moved his glasses and said in surprise, Oh? So you are a man. Damn it, what I hate the most are dead ladyboys. They are either men or women. Look at your character, one look and I can tell that you are the product of a human and a demon, or simply called a ladyboy. You! Lyumedes was so angry that her entire body trembled. She clasped her hands in front of her chest, and a wave of energy rippled towards Hu Guang's body. As the Virgo constellation guardian, his special ability was energy conversion. In any situation, he could remove part of the opponent's attack energy, and could also absorb part of the energy. When the opponent's strength was similar to his, he could often rely on his special ability to win. He belonged to the type that became stronger the more he was beaten. Hu Guang felt the opponent's energy fluctuation and did not dare to take it lightly. After all, the constellation guardian in front of him had already left a very deep impression on him. His figure swayed and he slid backwards, as if he was knocked down by the energy. Only Lyumedes could clearly feel that when her energy was about to hit Hu Guang's body, a strange energy fluctuation was emitted from Hu Guang's body, as if his body was smeared with lubricant, and his energy directly slid away. Towards Hu Guang's special energy fluctuation, Lyumedes could not help but be moved. Could it be that this opponent was like her, best at energy conversion? If that was the case, it did not seem to be easy to deal with. Without waiting for Lyumedes to think more, Hu Guang's fallen body had already moved. He was originally not tall, but when his body touched the ground, there was a sudden change. His body suddenly became thinner, but his whole body instantly stretched a little, as if there were no bones in his body at all. He did not stand up, but just slid on the ground, and was already in front of Lyumedes. One of his hands had already reached for Lyumedes's ankle. Lyumedes was shocked, but his reaction was still very fast. Both his feet touched the ground and immediately jumped up. This was the first time he saw such a method of attacking on the ground. He could not help but say to himself, "What is he doing?" Hu Guang did not give him much time to think. His body slightly swayed on the ground, and suddenly, the clothes on his body disappeared. Replacing it was a layer of dark green scales, and a faint dark green light covered his body. At this time, looking at him, it was completely impossible to tell that he was a human. The speed of his sliding suddenly increased, and in the blink of an eye, he had already reached the place where Lyumedes was about to fall. In order to be able to play to his advantage, Hu Guang immediately used his first stage of attribute dissimulation. A light flashed in Lyumedes's eyes, and his body nimbly flipped in the air. His head was above his feet, and his hands carried a layer of light that was like a blade, and directly cut down on Hu Guang's body. Being called a transvestite by Hu Guang, this Virgo constellation guardian was completely enraged. "Didn't you say that I was a transvestite? Well then, I will cut off your little dick first." Of course, Hu Guang did not know what his opponent was thinking. Seeing Lyumedes's hands cutting towards his body, his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of a strange light. He did not dodge, but when Lyumedes's hands were about to cut his body, Hu Guang slippery swayed a little, and Lyumedes once again felt that slippery energy. His attack energy could not hit the opponent's body at all, and had already slid past, landing on the ground, leaving 2 deep marks. At this time, Hu Guang's hands had already wrapped around his arms. Fighting with an opponent like Hu Guang was really the most painful thing. Lyumedes did not dare to let him stick to himself, and hurriedly used the counterforce of the bombardment to jump back 5 meters away. Hu Guang's ability was very limited. First of all, His own energy could be used on his own body, but it could not be released. However, it was also because of this limitation that his body had an extremely strong resistance to all kinds of energy attacks, and more than 80% immunity to physical attack. Seeing that Lyumedes had run away again, he swam over unhurriedly. "You can't keep dodging, don't let me seize the opportunity, or else he." Lyumedes looked at Hu Guang, who was slowly approaching him, and for a moment, he could not help but feel a sense of crisis. How should he deal with such an opponent? His own attacks seemed to be completely ineffective against him. Time did not allow him to think too much. The area left for them to fight at the top of Mount Everest was not big. Although Hu Guang's speed was not fast, he could cover a distance of 5 meters in the time it took him to twist his body a few times. Helplessly, Lyumedes's body flashed with light, and he had already activated his constellation protection. He did not believe that the slippery opponent in front of him could really dissipate all his attack energy. The starlight of Virgo fell on Lyumedes's body, and his energy aura suddenly became tyrannical. His body speed suddenly increased. Since he did not dare to come into contact with the opponent's body, then, he chose to attack in the form of pure energy. He successively blasted out 5 palms, and under the large area of attack, it covered all the places where Hu Guang could dodge. This time, he should be able to hit you. Indeed, this time Hu Guang had no possibility of dodging. Even if his energy was slippery, under the opponent's attack, he would still be hit. Not being able to use energy from the outside did not mean that there was no way to attack energy. Hu Guang's upper body suddenly rose up, but his lower body was still stuck to the ground. It looked like his waist was broken. He opened his hands, and the black nails looked somewhat terrifying. His originally slow speed suddenly increased, and his body flashed. He had already turned into a dark green light and collided with the energy of Lyumedes's attack. With a bang, Hu Guang's body quickly twisted in the air, trying to dissipate the opponent's energy as much as possible. At the same time that he was attacked by Lyumedes, he forcibly broke through the opponent's energy attack range. He opened his hands, and like venomous fangs, grabbed towards Lyumedes's shoulder. Creatures like snakes had never been easily moved. When they encountered prey, they would always patiently wait for an opportunity. Once the time was ripe, then, the snake's action would be as powerful as a thunderbolt. And at this time, it was just right to use it on Hu Guang. In fact, Hu Guang was best at chaotic battles. The more enemies there were, the more he could exert his strength. This kind of one-on-one battle was not his forte. However, after increasing his strength to the 7-cloud level, his own defensive ability had been extremely strengthened. It was not the strengthening of his defense, but the improvement of his ability to dissipate force. Lyumedes was not known for his powerful energy. Because he also had the characteristic of energy conversion, it caused him to have some flaws in the energy of his offensive skills. Therefore, Hu Guang's energy was just able to break through his blockade. Seeing that Hu Guang's hands had already covered his shoulders. In the face of danger, Lyumedes was shocked but not panicked. His hands closed in front of his chest, and a pure white energy bloomed between his hands, accompanied by a faint fragrance. Lyumedes's eyes flashed with a persistent light. The pure white energy instantly condensed into the shape of a knife, slashing horizontally at Hu Guang's body. At this time, Hu Guang's body was in a semi-upright state, and he was still rushing forward. It was too late to dodge. Even he himself did not expect that Lyumedes would attack him like this regardless of his own safety. Of course, his hands could grab the opponent's shoulders, but at the same time, all the energy condensed by the opponent's hands would be completely cut on his body. It was not worth it. In this case, even if he killed the opponent, he was afraid that he would be seriously injured. Hu Guang had always been known for his cunning. Seeing that the situation was not good, he immediately reacted in the shortest time possible. His snake-like body quickly twisted, and his lower body left the ground, making a leaping action. He wanted to jump over the energy from Lyumedes' attack, and continue to maintain his attack form. If it was before, Hu Guang's attack would definitely be successful. But Lyumedes had now activated his constellation protection, and his attack strength was many times stronger than before. The milky white energy suddenly bloomed, and the original blade form instantly turned into a big surface. From the bottom up, it directly slapped on Hu Guang's body, and his body flew out. Virgo's energy had a suction effect. As soon as the pure white light touched Hu Guang's body, Hu Guang clearly felt that his energy was being rapidly absorbed by the opponent. Although his body had been slapped away, a portion of his energy had actually been converted by the other party. Seeing the light radiating out from Lu Meite's body becoming much brighter than before, Hu Guang became infuriated. Damn it, I really can't fight one-on-one? Hu Guang was also angry. His whole body was in pain from the absorption and release of energy just now. This Zodiac snake warrior began to exert all his fighting ability. In the second stage of origin mutation, Hu Guang's body suddenly doubled in size under the dark green light, becoming more slender than before. His upper body rose again, facing the direction of Lyumedes. He opened his mouth and spat out a purplish-red mist. As the Black Mamba Emperor, the poison in Hu Guang's body was extremely strong. Just now when he attacked Lyumedes, there was only one purpose, which was to touch the opponent's body. Hu Guang believed that as long as the opponent was infected by the poison in his body, she would certainly not be spared. But Lyumedes was also quite slippery, and actually did not let him touch her. In this way, Hu Guang's strongest ability could not be exerted. However, Hu Guang, who had reached the second stage of attribute mutation, had become different. The biggest difference was that he could now release the toxins from his body. The purplish-red poisonous mist condensed and did not disperse. Floating in the air, it met the opponent's energy. What made Lyumedes turn pale with fright was that the energy he emitted was actually unable to fan away the mist-like poisonous mist. The purplish-red mist had already arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. In this crisis, Lyumedes could only let his body fall backwards, just like Hu Guang's initial action, and let the purplish-red poisonous mist go. Although he only breathed in a little of the purplish-red poisonous mist's sweet fragrance. But Lyumedes already felt that his whole body was empty, and the scenery in front of him seemed to have become blurred. It must be known that as the constellation guardian, Lyumedes's body's resistance to poison was very strong. But the Black Mamba Emperor's poison was after all too strong. Hu Guang did not move, nor did he attack the opponent. He just laughed, and the purplish-red poisonous mist that floated out actually quickly condensed in the air, turning into a purplish-red air arrow, rushing straight towards Lyumedes's body. The air arrow exploded in the air, turning into countless small purplish-red light spots, covering all the directions that Lyumedes could dodge. Don't underestimate Hu Guang's attack. Although the purplish-red mist didn't look very eye-catching, it was still extremely powerful. Although the purplish-red poisonous mist did not look very eye-catching to Hu Guang, this purplish-red poisonous mist was like Ryue's divine dragon transformation. It was his sure-kill ability. He only obtained it after advancing to the 7-cloud level. He gave his ability a name, called Emperor's Breath. The biggest characteristic of this poisonous mist was that it could ignore all energy attacks, and had the ability to penetrate any energy. As for its toxicity, it was needless to say. Even if it was an elephant, after coming into contact with a little of this purplish-red poisonous mist, as long as it did not have Hu Guang's detoxification, it would definitely die in a short period of time. Lyumedes indeed had no possibility of dodging. He could not wait to blast out all the energy in his body, but he could only watch as the purplish-red light shrouded his body. Moving quickly close to the ground did not allow him to completely avoid Hu Guang's attack. Both of his legs were touched by the purplish-red light. Lyumides did not stand up. The momentary paralysis made his body lose the ability to move. Although the energy in his body was running at full speed, he could not resist the poison of Emperor's black mamba. In an instant, his face had turned purplish-black. Despicable! You actually used poison! Mephistopheles roared and was about to rush over. Hu Guang said in a strange tone, I am a snake warrior of the Zodiac. Have you ever heard that snakes don't need poison? This is just my ability. Just like if your ability was to fart, I would definitely not say that you are despicable. Chi Yu's face revealed a trace of a smile, and said to Hu Guang, detoxify him. After all, he only hated Yamu, and did not want to involve the other constellation guardians. Hu Guang walked to Lyumides' side unsteadily, looked at his own hand and said with some regret, Sigh, I really don't want to touch this damn transvestite's body. It has been hard on you, my precious hand. As he said that, his hands were already pressed on both of Lyumides' legs. The poison was under the effect of Hu Guang's special energy, and was once again absorbed back into his body. The effect of the poisonous mist, just now on Hu Guang, was not small. Absorbing back some of the poison was still beneficial to him. The faces of the constellation guardians became even uglier. The opponent even had a method of releasing poison. How could they deal with such an enemy? The battle between the two sides was already tilting in the opposite direction. After being suppressed for the first 3 rounds, the Zodiac Guardian warrior finally broke out. With the efforts of Modi, Ru Yu, and Hu Guang, the Zodiac Guardian warrior turned the tide for 3 rounds in a row. The Zodiac Guardian warrior, who was behind by 2 rounds previously, became 1 round ahead. Yamu's gaze was very calm. While watching the battle, her gaze would often land on Chi Yu. But Chi Yu did not even look at her. His attention was completely focused on the battle between the two sides. Mephisto walked out with a calm face. The 7th round was the Constellation Guardian's turn for the Libra Constellation Guardian. Among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Changjie the Hummer was the one who came out to fight. After the tempering and battles of the ancient beasts, Changjie's originally majestic body had become even more burly. His entire body was filled with explosive power, and when he walked in front of Mephisto, his aura was obviously stronger than his opponent. Mephisto was obviously very dissatisfied with the previous few battles, and said in a deep voice, Libra Constellation Guardian Mephisto, experience. Horse Zodiac Warrior, Changjie. Come on. Changjie was still as valiant as ever. Without saying much, his muscles instantly swelled, and a violent attack covered the whole field in the blink of an eye. That's right, it was covered. If Modi's attack relied on speed, then Changjie's attack relied on violence. Every time he attacked, the huge energy would cause the space within a certain range to collapse. After a few punches, Mephisto had no choice but to fight him head-on. Changjie's attack method was fists, while Mephisto's palms. After the two's energy collided in the air for more than 10 times, Mephisto could not help but be surprised. This opponent was a Zodiac Guardian warrior that he had never seen before, but the tyrannical energy was actually not weaker than him. Changjie cheered in satisfaction. He loved these kinds of pure energy collisions the most. He was indeed worthy of his nickname, Hummer. Previously, during the ancient behemoth era, he had used his own strength to blast the bodies of the Jili people into pieces. He was known as the pulverizer on the battlefield. It was clear how tyrannical his strength was. Horses had the most coordinated muscles among all animals, and they also had the most beautiful figures. The muscles on Changjie's body completely displayed the characteristics of the horse zodiac. Not only did his muscles have strong explosive power, but they were also flexible. Mephisto's palms were hurting from Changjie's attack. In terms of energy, he was not inferior to Changjie, but in terms of physical strength, he could not compare to his opponent. Every time Changjie blasted out a punch, there would be a brownish-red energy fluctuation. The tyrannical energy caused the surrounding air to boil. However, the situation of the battle quickly changed. And the reason for this change was Mephisto's transformation. A faint light was emitted from Mephisto's body. His transformation was actually very simple. A yellow light was emitted from his body. It was not an attack, but it completely enveloped an area of 10 square meters, including him and Changjie. The yellow light was transparent, so both sides could see what was happening inside. The scales have already tilted. Don't you realize it? Mephisto's deep voice sounded. Within the yellow light, a sky formed by energy appeared, and he and Changjie were at one end of the sky. The scales on Changjie's side were raised high, while Mephisto's side was completely lowered. Changjie's body seemed to be bound by some kind of power. Although he was still launching violent attacks, the energy he used to attack had disappeared. Chapter 264. In order to break free from the sky blue, Changjie used the first and second stage of his attribute mutation. His already majestic body became as big as a mountain, but strangely, no matter how much he increased his strength, he still couldn't break free from the effect of the domain. Of course, in order to resist the opponent's energy counterattack, Mephisto also completed his constellation Guardian. The scale domain was actually very simple. Within a certain space, the owner of the domain could decide how the scales of victory would tilt. This domain could be used on oneself, and at the same time, it could be used on others. Under Mephisto's control, this warm domain was constantly consuming Changjie's energy. Seeing this, Qiyu could not help but sigh in his heart. It was a pity that Changjie did not have his own domain. Otherwise, with his berserk ability, Mephisto might not be his match. But it was too late to say anything now. The Hummer Changjie had entered the state of mineralization. As long as he could not break free from the opponent's domain, he would not be able to change the outcome of the battle. Thinking of the possible group battle, Qiyu took the place of Changjie to admit defeat. Both sides were evenly matched once again. Changjie looked at Mephisto indignantly. The feeling of being powerless in the domain just now made him extremely unhappy. Mephisto looked back at him calmly. Although he did not say anything, he seemed to be telling Changjie, "You can't possibly be my opponent in the domain." Unfortunately, what Mephisto did not know was that in the near future, when Changjie also had his own domain, the scales of victory would no longer tilt in his direction. At this time, the battle between both sides was already more than halfway, and each side still had 5 people who had not fought. And what surprised Yuma was that in the 8th battle, Qiyu did not let Yan Xiaoi fight and chose to directly give up, allowing Scorpio constellation guardian Soso to win without a fight. It was not that Qiyu did not trust Yan Xiaoi, but because Yan Xiaoi was the only non-combatant among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. With his combat ability, it was impossible for him to win against Soso. After all, as a Zodiac warrior, Yan Xiaoi's main abilities lay in healing and support. For the Zodiac Guardian God team, he was indispensable, but in a one-on-one duel, but it was no longer effective. Hesitating, Qiyu admitted defeat in the 8th match, allowing the Constellation Protectors to gain the upper hand. The last 4 matches between the Zodiac Guardian God and the Constellation Guardian God would be the most important. The 9th match. The representative of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors was the Monkey Zodiac Warrior Ian, while his opponent was the Sagittarius Zodiac Guardian Miguelis. At this point in the battle, both sides' fighting intent had already been completely raised. As the battle progressed, the smell of gunpowder became stronger and stronger. Ian looked at his opponent mockingly and shook his body. All the bones in his body crackled. He was very confident in his agility. Miguelis looked at Ian and did not make a move. Among the Constellation Protectors, Miguelis could be said to be the calmest person. Because of his ability, he had to maintain his calm in battle. As the Sagittarius Zodiac Guardian, Miguelis's ability was to lock onto and be accurate. Looking at Ian, who was not tall but had 4 slender limbs, Miguelis could not help but rejoice in his heart. From his opponent's appearance, he could tell that the Zodiac guardian god in front of him was an expert in agility. To him, the Zodiac guardian god in front of him was definitely an expert in agility. To him, this was the kind of opponent he hoped to meet the most. According to the Zodiac's order, he was facing the monkey Zodiac warrior. Would the agile monkey Zodiac warrior be able to dodge his arrows? Ian naturally did not know what Miguelis was thinking. Seeing that his opponent was not moving, he could not help but let out a roar. His body extended and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Miguelis. Although Miguelis had already judged that Ian was an extremely agile Zodiac guardian god, but when Ian really displayed his speed, he was still shocked. Following the increase in his strength, Ian's speed had already reached a level where it was hard to see with the naked eye. With a flash of gold light, his skinny hands had already reached Miguelis's throat and chest. Although Miguelis was shocked, he did not panic. He quickly retreated 3 steps, and a layer of gold light erupted from his body. In the blink of an eye, he had already blocked Ian's attack. However, was Ian really that easy to deal with? Sharp energy waves spun and gushed into Miguelis's body like a sharp cone. He only heard a muffled groan, and immediately suffered a small loss from Ian's attack. Both sides had seen the previous battle. The battle that left the deepest impression on Ian was the one where Modi won. Modi's storm-like attacks did not give her opponent any chance at all, and Ian very much hoped that the same situation would happen to him. He spread out his body. Although his legs were not as fast as Modi's, he had a fast body movement technique. The golden light was like a jumping star, constantly bouncing up and down around Miguelis. The sharp air currents constantly pierced through the air. Accompanied by the shrill roar from Ian, the powerful energy attacks immediately brought great trouble to Miguelis. Miguelis knew that if this continued, his opponent would not give him any chance. While resisting Ian's attacks with difficulty, he quickly gathered the energy in his body. After a short period of contact, he already had a certain understanding of Ian's attack method. Just as Ian appeared by his side again, both of his palms aimed at his chest, Miguelis did something that no one could have imagined. He gave up on resisting, both of his arms spread out to the sides of his body. At the moment when Ian's attack was about to reach him, he activated his constellation protection. The energy brought by the constellation instantly filled his body. Miguelis's body trembled, and Ian's palms had already pressed forward. Ian only felt that his hands seemed to have pressed against a soft barrier. Although the sharp energy exploded out, the opponent's soft energy was extremely fast and dispersed the energy of his attack. Without waiting for him to react, Miguelis had already floated backward. Borrowing the power of his attack in the blink of an eye, he had already retreated to the edge of the battlefield. Miguelis spat out a mouthful of blood in the process of retreating. After all, Ian's attack power was extremely shocking. Although he had borrowed the constellation protection's energy to dissolve a lot of it, it was impossible for him to dissolve all of it. The meridians in his body had already suffered heavy injuries, but it was also because of this injury that changed the entire situation of the battle. Seeing that Miguelis had not completely fallen into a disadvantageous position, but was still being attacked by Ian's palms, Chi-Yu knew that it was bad. On the battlefield, there was only one situation that would occur, and that was when one had a trump card and had to fight for time. Only then would one use such a method. Thinking about the constellation that Miguelis belonged to, Chi-Yu's heart immediately tensed up. Ian had forced Miguelis to retreat, but the constellation protection had already been completed. It caused Miguelis's energy to increase greatly. In order to better fight against the opponent, Ian did not hesitate to activate his own attribute mutation. Golden hair appeared on his body, and his body seemed to have shrunk a little. But an explosive energy aura appeared on his body. Ian knew the importance of this battle. So, when he saw the opponent using the constellation protection, he immediately activated the 2 attribute mutations and raised his battle power to the highest level. But he did not know that because of this delay, it had already given Miguelis enough time. When he was sent flying by Ian, Miguelis had already raised both of his hands. In that instant, his eyes had completely turned golden. He extended his left arm forward, and his right hand pulled back in the void. Following the completion of the constellation protection, a golden longbow formed from energy appeared in his hands without any warning. There were no arrows in Miguelis's hands, but there was a ball of intense golden light. That golden light extended along with the contribution of his energy, and the sharpness of the golden light had completely turned into the shape of an arrow. Feeling a wave of spiritual power lock on to his body, Ian was instantly shocked. Looking at Miguelis's actions, he immediately knew that things were not good. He had already floated up in the first instance, and was practically sticking close to the ground as he pounced towards Miguelis. In the process of charging forward, because Ian had raised his own speed to the limit, 7 to 8 of his figures appeared on the battlefield at the same time, and for a moment, the spectators were all dazzled. It did not matter who could not see it clearly, as long as Miguelis could see it clearly, then, the outcome was already decided. As the constellation guardian of Sagittarius, how could Miguelis not cherish the opportunity that he had exchanged for at the cost of being injured? At this moment, what he had condensed was all of his energy. Concentrated on that arrow, the completely condensed energy was extremely terrifying. The air around Miguelis's body was completely distorted. Just like Ilya's from Leo constellation, the holy energy around his body had already begun to burn. Burning for this arrow. Buzz! When Ian's body had just rushed forward halfway, Miguelis had already released the energy bowstring in his hands. That golden light actually penetrated 7 of Ian's illusions in an instant, and the last afterimage was Ian's real body. The trajectory of the 8th figure's movement just happened to merge with that golden light. It's over. This thought appeared in every Zodiac Guardian warrior's mind. They were very clear about the consequences of being hit by that arrow. Not to mention Ian, even if his defense was stronger than his, it would not be able to withstand that completely condensed energy. This arrow was no longer a simple victory, it was also going to take away Ian's life at the same time. Hu Guang roared, "Old E." Although he bickered with Ian every day, in his heart, Ian was his eternal brother. The relationship between the two could not even be measured by ordinary brotherly love. At this moment, how could Hu Guang not be anxious? However, even if he wanted to save Ian, it was already too late. Just when that golden light was about to reach Ian's body and everything was about to become irreversible, suddenly, a green light flashed diagonally and quietly collided with that golden light from the side. The golden light floated past, and the lock-on effect immediately disappeared. It almost brushed past Ian's body and flashed past, leaving a deep wound on his left arm. As the golden light went far away, only a loud rumble could be heard from afar. Above a mountain peak that was about 7,000 meters high next to Mount Everest, a ball of golden splendor erupted. It actually triggered a strong avalanche on that snow-capped mountain, and for a moment, a snowy mist filled the air. Looking from the top of Mount Everest, one could see that magnificent scene completely. Chi-Yu lowered his raised arms, and his eyes were full of killing intent. If he had not used Kiran's thundercloud force to release a quick arrow at the critical moment to deflect Miguelis's arrow, perhaps Ian would have already died on Mount Everest. A strong killing intent filled his whole body. In a flash, Chi-Yu had already arrived at the center of the field. His right hand flashed and grabbed Ian's injured arm. Under the effect of Kiran's marrow-washing and muscle-tendon-changing art, the thundercloud force stopped the bleeding. Looking at Miguelis, who was slightly panting due to the depletion of energy, Chi-Yu's eyes were as sharp as a blade, and his tyrannical aura had completely locked onto Miguelis. The Zodiac Guardian God warriors pressed forward at the same time, standing behind Chi-Yu. No one spoke, but the situation on the top of Mount Everest suddenly became tense. Hu Guang even directly entered his own origin transformation state, ready to pounce on his opponent at any time. Yamu frowned and stopped the Zodiac Guardian God warriors from moving. Her delicate body floated forward and came in front of Chi-Yu. The two of them looked at each other, feeling Chi-Yu's killing intent that could erupt at any time. She said, "Chi-Yu, you have seen the situation just now. If Miguelis does not go all out, he will lose. It is inevitable that we will compete." Enough! The furious Chi-Yu suddenly felt a warm flow of air coming from the Sarira bead on his wrist, and immediately calmed down a little. He looked at Yamu with a burning gaze and said in a deep voice, "Yamu, I don't care about anything else, but you have to remember one thing. If one of my companions dies here today, then your Zodiac Guardian God will not be able to leave alive. We have lost the battle just now, let's continue." With a wave of his hand, he stopped Hu Guang, who was about to step forward, and led everyone back to their original position. It was not that Chi-Yu would soften in front of Yamu, but under the influence of the Sarira bead, he calmed down and could not help but think of Zagreus' words. Killing a Miguelis would not make him feel any psychological burden, but for the sake of a possible world crisis in the future, he still endured the killing intent in his heart. After all, his only enemy was Yamu. In order to leave some bloodline of the Greek guardians, these Zodiac guardians still had to be left alive. Ian gratefully said to Chi-Yu in a low voice, "Boss, thank you." Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "We're brothers, there's no need to thank me. Just now, the other party just took advantage of your eagerness to win. Just be careful in the future, with your overall strength, you should be above him. Remember, if you face such an opponent in the future, you must not let them pull away from you." Looking at Chi-Yu leading the Zodiac Guardians back to their side, Yamu could not help but feel relieved. What she did not want to see the most was a chaotic battle filled with the smell of death. If that really happened, then the relationship between the Greek Guardians and the Eastern Guardians would no longer be able to be eased. Chi-Yu pulled Ming Ming to his side, ignoring the ambiguous gazes of the other Zodiac Guardians, and hugged her. Ming Ming was startled. Just when she was thinking about the upcoming battle, she could not help but blush. She struggled a little and said in a low voice, "Chi-Yu, what are you doing? Everyone is watching." Chi-Yu said in a somewhat domineering tone, "I don't care, let them watch. Don't they know the relationship between us? Ming Ming, you must promise me, no matter what the situation is, even if you lose in the end. You must not take risks for the sake of victory. To me, your life is far more important than victory." His voice sounded a little excited. Ming Ming was about to fight. Chi-Yu could not help but think of Wen Ting, who died because of him, and now there was no news from him. He knew. For him, Ming Ming would definitely go all out, just like Ilya's before. Unless she lost all her fighting power, she would never give up. Now they were 2 games behind the opponent, which meant that in the remaining 3 games, they must maintain a complete victory to win the final victory. The burden on Ming Ming's shoulders was very heavy, so Chi-Yu specially reminded her before the start of the battle. Ming Ming's eyes revealed a trace of gentle light. During this period, because Chi-Yu did not accompany her for too long, Ming Ming could not help but feel a little neglected. She could not help but feel a little neglected, but Chi-Yu had ignored the ridicule of his companions and hugged her in front of everyone to remind her. This caused the trace of doubt in her heart to disappear. Recalling the situation when she was seriously injured on Tianxiang Mountain, when Chi-Yu did not hesitate to use his blood to save her life, she could not help but secretly swear that no matter what, she must win the battle in front of her. Looking at Ming Ming nodding, Chi-Yu could not help but let out a sigh of relief. He did not expect that not only did his persuasion not work as it should, but it also strengthened Ming Ming's confidence to win. After all, Ian's encounter just now made Chi-Yu feel afraid. He could not afford to lose any of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Moreover, it was his lover. However, there was not much need for him to worry. Among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, besides Ryue, Ming Ming was the most powerful one. Even Su Dong might not be able to escape unscathed under Ming Ming's phoenix transformation. Floating forward, Ming Ming came to the center of the field and was about to start the battle. The gentle light in her eyes suddenly disappeared, and she looked terrifyingly calm. A faint seven-colored light flashed in her eyes. Ming Ming looked at Yuma with hatred, then turned her gaze to the opponent, Capricorn constellation guardian Miero. If Chiyu was most familiar with the constellation guardians, it would undoubtedly be Miero. Previously, when he fought with Miero, he understood the mystery of the energy blade transformation, and the one who benefited the most from it was Ming Ming, who had the iron wing technique. Now, what was about to start was a battle between the Shura blades. Miero's expression was very calm. His hands that were much larger than normal people kept bending and stretching. A faint green light spread from his hands to his body, and a sharp aura directly shrouded Ming Ming's body. As a constellation guardian who was obsessed with battle, Miero would never hesitate just because his opponent was a woman. Previously, when Miero had been defeated by Chiyu without any suspense, it had stimulated the fighting spirit in his heart. Although he didn't have his own domain like Mephisto and Nimbus, he had undoubtedly been the most hard-working in his training. To Miero, there was no need for any fancy moves. What he pursued was the sharpness of the Shura blades. Specializing in one ability caused his strength to be much more terrifying than when he had faced Chiyu. Standing in his own camp, Chiyu could clearly feel the change in Miero's energy. If the last time he faced him, he was a sharp blade, then the current him was an even sharper dagger. The surface of the sharpness had become smaller, but it could also make it more condensed. Could Ming Ming, who also used the iron wing technique as her main attack, win against her opponent in terms of sharpness? Even Chiyu did not have the slightest bit of confidence. As the saying goes, worry will cause chaos. This was what Chiyu was feeling now. A rainbow-colored light lit up, and Ming Ming slowly raised her arms to the sides of her body. The rainbow-colored light condensed into two sharp blades on her arms. Looking at her opponent, Ming Ming did not attack immediately. Sensing the change in energy on Ming Ming's body, Miero could not help but reveal a trace of surprise on his face. He immediately realized that this girl's attack ability was actually very similar to his. Although he had seen Ming Ming before, this was the first time he saw Ming Ming's strength. From the energy aura, he felt that Ming Ming was giving him a strong sense of oppression. From this point, it could be seen that the young beauty in front of him was definitely not weaker than him. Miero slowly raised his right arm. Just like the energy light on Ming Ming's arms, a sharp green light condensed on his right arm. The strong energy wave caused the energy on his entire body to become incomparably sharp. He slowly turned sideways to face Ming Ming. From his right arm, the entire right side of his body had become his blade. Their auras faced each other. The similar energy wave caused both of them to become incomparably focused. Neither of them rushed to make the first move. After all, it was the same sharp energy. Only when it was the closest to one's body would the attack be the most powerful. In a situation where they did not have the absolute upper hand in terms of energy, whoever made the first move would be at a disadvantage. At this moment, whether it was Ming Ming or Miero, it was obvious that they did not have the absolute upper hand. Thus, while continuously condensing energy, they slowly walked towards each other, feeling the sharpness of each other's energy. Their expressions became solemn. Finally, when there was only a distance of 5 meters between them, both of them shouted at the same time. They pounced in the direction of their opponent. The energy did not leave their bodies. Instead, they engaged in close combat in all directions. The ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing could be heard as the rainbow light and the plane energy collided. It gave people an unbearable feeling. Both of their attacks were displayed to the maximum. In an instant, the center of the battlefield was instantly filled with two illusory figures. In that instant when they collided, it was unknown how many times they had exchanged blows. Her body flashed, and Ming Ming arrived at Miero's position. Miero also arrived at the place where she was standing. They were still facing each other. However, the energy on their arms were fluctuating violently. Ming Ming's arms seemed to be trembling slightly. The veins on Miero's right arm were bulging. The clothes on his right arm had already turned into powder. The enormous energy light caused them to have no choice but to slow down the energy of their opponent's attack. They looked at each other. They began to condense energy for the second attack. From the current situation, the two of them were evenly matched. Ming Ming's advantage was the twin arms iron wings technique, and Miero's advantage was his specialization in his right arm. The energy was more condensed. Taking a deep breath, Miero's gaze became sharp. The green light aura on his body had an additional metallic luster. With a long whistle, he activated the Constellation Guard. As the only fighter with the Constellation Guard as armor, his defense immediately appeared when the Constellation Guard was activated. The rainbow light aura became even more dazzling. A head of rainbow long hair floated down from his back. The first stage of origin mutation also appeared when the opponent activated the Constellation Guard. The rainbow feathers also flickered with a metallic luster. Ming Ming's arms had already turned into real wings. The rainbow feathers revolved around him. It looked extremely dazzling at the peak of Mt. Everest. Miero's right arm stood up again. The green-gold light aura increased the sharpness of his energy to the limit. The air around his right arm continued to make popping sounds. The air that came into contact with the sharp energy was torn apart. A streak of green lightning actually stopped on his right arm. The metallic luster looked extremely tyrannical. Ming Ming suddenly moved. Her delicate body only flickered for a moment. She immediately retreated 10 meters. Her chi was drawn. Immediately, Miero unleashed his full strength. The green-gold blade pierced through his arm. It was his strongest Hell Azura blade. Ming Ming did not use the Azura Iron Wings technique to counter it. Seeing the surging energy and the chi locked onto her body, she was not flustered at all. She crossed her arms in front of her. Her delicate body was instantly enveloped by the rainbow wings. Pieces of rainbow feathers intersected and floated into the air. They swept towards Miero's body. Since he had unleashed his full strength, Miero did not even have the chance to dodge. He did not seem to see Ming Ming's attack at all. He focused all his energy on the Hell Azura blade. He did not believe that Ming Ming had the sharpness of her energy to block his full strength attack. Indeed, although Ming Ming's overall strength was stronger than Miero's, facing Miero's Hell Azura blade was like how Ian faced Migueliz's arrow of understanding. She could not block it head-on. However, Miero had neglected Ming Ming's ability to adapt. When the seven-colored feather floated out, the aura that he had locked onto Ming Ming's body was actually shattered by the spiraling feather. However, Miero was not worried at all. Although his Hell Azura blade was only attacking in a straight line, it was impossible for Ming Ming to dodge it. However, did Ming Ming really have to take his opponent's attack head-on? The answer was no. The rainbow light shone again. This time, Ming Ming's body changed. Her delicate body soared into the air like a bolt of lightning. She froze in midair. From her current height, she could dodge the Hell Azura blade's attack. After all, without the energy locking effect, no matter how powerful Miero's attack was, it could not hit Ming Ming directly. Miero's eyes flashed, and his right arm suddenly moved rhythmically like a wave in the air. A strange scene happened. The tyrannical Hell Azura blade ability actually stopped for a moment, and then directly swept up Xiang Mingming's delicate body from the bottom up. Chapter 265. That's right. Over the past few days, Miero had improved his Shura blade to the level of using chi to control the blade. Leaving his body didn't mean that he had lost control. Looking at his opponent flying in the air, Miero sneered. "You can't fly, can you?" My energy will follow your body. No matter how you dodge, you won't be able to escape the fate of failure. The rainbow-colored feather was already close to Miero's body, but he wasn't afraid. He believed that Ming Ming wouldn't use a large amount of energy to attack him. With the Constellation Guard armor, he was confident that he could block Ming Ming's attack. As long as his Hell Shura blade worked, the outcome of today's battle would be decided. However, was the outcome of the battle already decided? Ming Ming used her actions to tell Miero that she could fly. Her petite body expanded in the rainbow-colored light. The fledgling phoenix appeared at the most crucial moment. Her enlarged body rose into the air in the blink of an eye. Although the greenish-gold blade was still chasing after her, as her body rose higher, Ming Ming's energy kept increasing under the effect of the fledgling phoenix transformation. On the other hand, Miero's Hell Shura blade gradually weakened as the distance between them increased. The rainbow-colored feather approached him. Miero only had time to wave his right arm. However, more than 70% of the feather still stuck to his body. What surprised him was that the feather that shone with a metallic luster didn't have any cutting ability. Instead, it stuck to his body and glowed faintly. He didn't understand what was going on. Ming Ming's speed kept increasing. The greenish-gold blade was getting further and further away from him. All of a sudden, the rainbow phoenix that was hovering in the air suddenly turned around. Her beautiful body shone with a dazzling 7-colored light as she swooped down. The rainbow phoenix twin soaring wings, the Azura Iron Wings art was pushed to its limit at this moment. The rainbow-colored light and the greenish-gold light separated immediately. When Ming Ming's body continued to fall, the greenish-gold light had completely disappeared. At this moment, Miero was shocked to discover something. A numb feeling spread throughout his body. Every feather transmitted a sharp energy. Although most of it was blocked by his armor, it still stimulated various parts of his body. Under the stimulation of this energy, which was not very strong, he actually lost the ability to move. It was even difficult for him to mobilize his own energy. He didn't know that this was the mysterious Eastern pressure point technique. Each feather was located at one of his acupoints, even if his own energy was strong, but, as the weakest acupoint in the human body, it was connected to the blood vessels. It didn't require too much energy to make him lose all possibility of attack. Miero's body floated up, but it wasn't of his own will. The feathers that were connected to Ming Ming's life force carried his body up, and at this moment, the colorful phoenix had turned into a powerful rainbow that descended from the sky. When the rainbow-colored feather reached his body, everything would be over. The end of the battle would also mean the end of his life. Didn't you want to kill Ian? Fine, I'll let you know what it means to kill a murderer. Ming Ming's cold murderous intent made the ice and snow on Mount Everest pale in comparison. Have mercy! Yamu cried out. Her delicate body floated up to block Ming Ming's attack. Holy energy suddenly bloomed, forming a huge light barrier that enveloped Miero's body. Under her interference, Ming Ming immediately lost control of the feathers she had released, causing Miero's body to suddenly descend and fall heavily to the ground. Seeing Yamu's obstruction, Ming Ming didn't stop her attack. Instead, she increased her energy to the maximum. She had long wanted to take revenge on Yamu for what she had done to Chiyu. Now, how could she let go of such a good opportunity? Mississippi, the Constellation Guardians couldn't help but cry out in concern. After all, they could clearly feel that Ming Ming's energy was so strong. At this moment, she, who had used the fledgling phoenix transformation, was not inferior to Ruyu, who had previously defeated Ilis in a domineering manner. And if Yamu were to face her head-on, would she be able to escape unscathed? Chiyu didn't move. If it was a life-and-death battle, he would definitely stop Yamu from intercepting Ming Ming. However, his target was Yamu alone. He didn't want to destroy the Constellation Guardians. Hence, he just watched quietly from below. Although he hated Yamu, he also believed that Yamu would never hurt Ming Ming. It was a strange feeling. Maybe it was because of the mournful look that Yamu gave him when she leaped up. The golden light instantly condensed, and countless golden runes appeared in front of Yamu. A huge round shield had unknowingly blocked her delicate body. Seeing that the colorful phoenix was crashing towards her, Yamu's golden round shield tilted slightly, ignoring Ming Ming's chi lock. She only used the side of the shield to let Ming Ming brush past. Instantly, the ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other and the change in energy caused a huge shockwave. Amidst the loud bang, a deep ravine appeared on the peak of Mount Everest. The colorful light flickered, and Ming Ming had already returned to Chi Yu's side. She was slightly panting, looking at the undamaged golden shield. She couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. She knew very well how powerful her attack was, but it didn't have the desired effect. Ming Ming couldn't help but feel very dissatisfied in her heart. Yamu also returned to her own camp. Her face looked slightly pale. Although Ming Ming's strength couldn't be compared to Chi Yu's, as an 8-cloud level Zodiac Guardian God Warrior, her full-strength attack was not that easy to resist. In a hurry, under the premise that she didn't want to hurt Ming Ming, although she tried her best to block Ming Ming's attack, she still had to bear the extremely strong sharpness, which consumed a lot of her energy. Even a strand of her beautiful purple hair that wasn't protected by the round shield had been cut off, floating in the air. It slowly fell. Looking at Chi Yu, Yamu sighed and said, "Why bother? If we really want to kill each other every time, to the point that we have to save each other, if that's the case, why not let us fight the final battle directly?" Chi Yu shook his head and said, "No, I won't take advantage of you. There are still 2 more rounds, you guys are in the lead now, you just need to win 1 more round. Let's continue, you and I will restrain our own comrades." Yamu looked at Chi Yu's calm face, and the sorrow in her heart grew even stronger. She could only nod her head slowly, and whispered a few words to the next Zodiac Guardian, but no one knew what she said. A battle of sharp energy. The result ended without any suspense. Although the sharpness of Ming Ming's energy was not as strong as Miero's, but under the effects of the ice spring and the group training, her overall energy had increased by a lot. The speed of improvement was too fast. Her fledgling phoenix transformation and Ryue's divine dragon transformation, even Yuyun and Mephisto with their domains would not be able to withstand it, let alone the other Zodiac Guardians. The next battle would not be any less dangerous than the previous one, because, the next battle, it would be a battle between ice and fire. Aquarius Constellation Guardian Sa Lung, yes, Dog Zodiac Warrior Guan Ping. The 2 of them appeared. The aura emitted from their bodies was completely different. On the extremely low temperature of Mount Everest, Sa Lung's energy was obviously of great assistance. The blue light flickered, and it looked like his entire body was filled with an ice-cold aura. Looking at Sa Lung, Chi Yu could not help but think of the Princess of Hell, Sa Lung, who had a similar name. He did not know how she was doing. He did not know how she was going to explain to her father when she returned. Guan Ping did not release the energy from his body, but his eyes flashed with a burning flame. Looking at the opponent who was like an ice mountain, his gentle face started to become tyrannical. Because the temperature here was very low, if he released the energy from his body, it would affect him greatly, so Guan Qing tried his best to preserve the energy. No matter how strong or weak the opponent in front of him was, he could not lose. Ming Ming had already completed her mission. If he lost, then everything would be for naught. Sa Lung faced Guan Ping. His eyes had also turned ice blue. The snow mist floated down from the sky, and actually enveloped his body. Under the effect of his energy, the temperature of the entire Mount Everest dropped by a few degrees, and became even colder. The light in Chi Yu's eyes was very calm, he was waiting quietly. At this moment, regardless of whether it was Guan Ping who came up first, or Guan Jing who came up last, he would not think about their strength anymore. The only thing he could choose was absolute trust. Trusting his own partner would bring him victory. The light flickered, and Guan Ping's energy aura suddenly became tyrannical. The energy fluctuations on his body caused the air to distort in the silence. It was not the energy he emitted, but the heat from his body. It was not only his energy that was scorching, but his heart was also scorching. The snow mist that condensed around Soling's body moved. The snow mist floated up and condensed into two huge snow-white ice wings, which bombarded Guan Ping's body. In an instant they reached both sides of Guan Ping's body. Seeing this scene, Chiyu could not help but secretly sigh in relief. When he saw the large snow mist wrapping around Soling's body, he thought that the domain was going to appear again. But now, it seemed that although Soling's attack was very special and could borrow the power of nature, it obviously did not have the ability to control the domain. Guan Ping let out a roar of fire. He did not dodge, and golden red flames soared into the air. He spread his arms to the sides, and the scorching airflow had completely melted Soling's attack. However, this was obviously just the beginning. Countless icicles floated out from the ice mist that enveloped Soling, and instantly covered all the areas where Guan Ping could dodge. Guan Ping was ready, but the icicles suddenly spread out and surrounded his body in the center. The next moment they shot out. That's right, they shot out with Guan Ping's body as the center. Although these sharp icicles could not really hurt Guan Ping's body, under the effect of the sharp cold airflow, it still made him a little flustered. In desperation, Guan Ping had no choice but to immediately activate his first stage of attribute mutation. In an instant, his body swelled up, his short golden hair, and the golden red flames burning on his body immediately turned Soling's attack into nothingness. Guan Ping knew that he could not wait any longer. At the top of Mount Everest, this world of ice and snow was too helpful to Soling. If he was allowed to use the power of nature to consume his own energy, then everything would become difficult. Guan Ping moved. After entering the first stage of attribute mutation, Guan Ping's body became extremely tyrannical. Using his powerful explosive power, he directly rushed towards the ice mist in front of him. The golden red flames burned fiercely, and wherever they went, the ice mist immediately vaporized, opening up the scene in front of him. Soling finally appeared. When Guan Ping saw his body, he was surprised to find that Soling was actually sealed in a piece of blue ice. Soling clasped his hands in front of his chest and looked very calm inside the ice, as if the battle in front of him had nothing to do with him. Of course, Guan Ping would not show mercy because of his opponent's change. With a punch filled with surging energy, he instantly blasted the ice in front of him. After shattering the berserk lion fist, the scorching fire energy formed a vortex, and the golden red flames completely covered Guan Ping's right arm. The violent energy melted the surrounding ice and snow, causing the ice ground within a radius of 5 square meters around him and Soling to sink. Boom! Guan Ping's right fist blasted on the blue ice without any fancy move. At this moment, time seemed to stop, and everyone's eyes were focused on his fist. The sound of breaking rang out, and cracks appeared in the blue ice. With Guan Ping's fist as the center, the ice gradually began to turn into powder. Just when Guan Ping thought that he had won, and even killed his opponent, a change suddenly occurred. The ice that had turned into powder suddenly froze in midair, and in the next moment, the volume of the ice actually expanded dozens of times. In just an instant, it completely enveloped Guan Ping's right arm. As the ice spread, Guan Ping's body was actually engulfed by the sweeping ice and snow. The ice around Soling's body also disappeared along with Guan Ping's freezing. With a wah sound, Soling spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body was covered with a layer of frost. He, who had already secretly used the constellation protection, swayed violently, and almost fell to the ground. His face was extremely pale, without a trace of blood. Obviously, his body had suffered a severe injury. However, his expression at this time was excited, and he muttered to himself, "Absolute zero, I'm finally close to absolute zero. I won, I won. He, who usually did not show his emotions on his face, was now full of an excited smile. At the same time, the Constellation Guardians also burst into loud cheers. Ilyas, regardless of the pain, was the first to rush over, and he picked up Solung and threw him into the air. This was the battle that decided the outcome of the battle. Solung won, which meant that Chi Yu's side had no hope of turning the tables. It turned out that when Solung felt the energy aura on Guan Ping's body, he knew that he might not be the opponent of this Zodiac Guardian in front of him. However, he was not willing to lose, and he knew that he only had one chance. Using the natural environment on Mount Everest that was advantageous to him, Solung set up this trap. His initial attacks were just probing attacks using his spiritual power to control the ice and snow, and they did not have much lethality. He, who was hiding in the snow mist, directly activated the constellation protection, quietly condensing his own energy to the strongest state, and activated his ability that he had not yet fully completed. When Guan Ping's attack approached him, he used his condensed energy to dissolve Guan Ping's attack as much as possible, and used his ability to freeze his opponent. However, Solung's prediction of Guan Ping's strength was still a little off. Guan Ping's attack was extremely tyrannical, and even through the incomparably hard ice, it still seriously injured his body. At this time, Solung was temporarily unable to fight. "Don't be in such a hurry to cheer, the battle is not over yet," Chi Yu said coldly. Although his voice was not loud, it was clearly heard by everyone on the top of Mount Everest in the howling cold wind. Ilyas put Solung on the ground. Glancing at the completely frozen Guan Qing, he said in a deep voice, "What? Do you still think that your Zodiac Guardian God can still fight? He has already lost his ability to fight. If you don't hurry up and save him, don't blame us if something happens to him." With a slight smile, Chi Yu's eyes revealed a faint light. "I said that the battle is not over, so it is not over." "That's right, the battle is indeed not over." A fanatical voice sounded from the ice, and with a loud bang, the ice that sealed Guan Ping was shattered. The ice splashed in all directions, staining the faces of the Zodiac Guardian warriors who were very close. Guan Ping's body had grown to a height of 3 meters, and his whole body was covered with golden hair. The tyrannical and developed muscles looked even more powerful than the previous Hummer, filled with a violent aura. He walked towards Solung step by step. Solung looked at Guan Ping in surprise and said in disbelief, "No, this is impossible. Under the absolute zero ice seal, you should at least have lost the ability to fight." Guan Ping snorted disdainfully. "That is if you can really use absolute zero. Unfortunately, although the temperature of your ice seal is extremely low, it is not a true absolute zero. But it's not absolute zero in the true sense of the word. In addition, you were attacked by me first, so the energy you emitted is far from enough to truly seal me. How about it, do you still want to continue?" The scorching light burned again. This time, Guan Ping no longer held back. His whole body bloomed with a golden red light, making the top of Mount Everest look so bright. Indeed, Solung's attack method was far beyond Guan Qing's expectations. However, among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, other than the 3 who had already advanced to the 8-Cloud realm, he was the closest to the 8-Cloud realm. Moreover, the Nei pill of the fire attribute fierce beast that was killed by everyone was absorbed by him. In addition, he ate a lot of contracted meat, causing Guan Ping's body to become the purest fire attribute. Although Solung's powerful attack also caused him a lot of damage and consumed a lot of his fire energy, it was still impossible to truly seal him. At the same time, when he was frozen before, due to the incomparably cold energy from the outside world fully stimulated Guan Qing's own fire elemental body, finally allowing him to suddenly advance to the 8-Cloud realm under the huge pressure. Not only did he break through the opponent's blockade in one fell swoop, at the same time, it also greatly improved Guan Ping's strength. For a moment, the tyrannical fire energy aura shocked everyone present. As Kiran, the king of the Zodiac, Chi-Yu was very familiar with the energy aura of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Therefore, after Guan Ping was frozen, he was not anxious, because he clearly felt that Guan Ping's aura did not disappear because of the ice seal, and was in the process of condensing and undergoing a qualitative change. The fourth 8-cloud Zodiac Guardian warrior finally appeared. Salang looked at Guan Ping with a pale face. Just as he was about to fight with the opponent again, he was stopped by Yama's scepter of the goddess of victory. Yama shook her head at Salang. She was very clear that Salang's current situation required immediate treatment instead of continuing to fight. Otherwise, it would definitely bring irreparable damage to his body. We have lost this round, let's proceed to the last round. Pisces Garcia, come out. After welcoming back the victorious Guan Qing, the Zodiac Guardian warriors not only did not feel excited, but instead became even more solemn. At this time, both sides had 5 wins and 1 loss, and the last round would determine the victory of the entire battle. Everyone was not very familiar with the opponent's Pisces constellation Guardian Garcia, but even if they calculated according to the average strength, he would definitely not be too weak. And the last Zodiac Guardian warrior, the pig warrior Guanjing, was the weakest among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Although he had also just reached the 6-cloud level, as the latest to join the Zodiac Guardian warrior camp, and with the weakest physique, could he defeat his opponent? Looking at everyone's gloomy expression, Guan Jing said snappily, F***CK, do you all have no confidence in me? F***CK, I will win for you all to see. As he said that, he walked out swaggeringly. Among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, there were 3 Fatso, Vol, Mo Dan, and Guan Jing. Mo Dan had lost weight because of the training, but Vol did not change much. And Guan Jing was the exact opposite of Mo Dan. For some reason, not only did he not lose weight, but he also greatly increased. He patted his fat belly and walked out. He looked like a rich landlord. Garcia was very beautiful and looked very innocent. Guan Jing had always been interested in both men and women. Seeing that the opponent was a beauty, his perverted eyes immediately lit up. So it's a beauty. Why don't you admit defeat? I, old pig, am very protective of the fairer sex. It would be bad if I hurt you, right? Even if you weren't hurt, we shouldn't hurt our friendship. Isn't that right? One look at you and I can see that you are different from those guys, much kinder than them. In the future, if you Constellation Guardians submit to our Zodiac Guardian God, you can follow me, I will definitely take good care of you. After saying the last sentence, Guan Jing could not help but let out a few perverted laughs. That look, it was as if landlord Zhou Bapi was teasing his tenant. Behind him, Su Dong chuckled and said, This Fatso. He is indeed famous for being a promiscuous eater. As far as I know, the lads in his team have a lot of complaints about him. This expert who eats both men and women, I really can't compare to him. It seems that the most lascivious one among us is him. The usually bickering Yan Xiaoi and Hu Guang nodded at the same time and said in unison, That's right, this promiscuous eater is the most lascivious. Garcia was indeed very innocent. Other than training, the people he interacted with were all gentlemen. It was the first time he met someone like Guan Jing. Looking at the fat on Guan Jing's face jiggling when she laughed, he could not help but feel that it was funny, and said with a smile, Surrendering is impossible. Even if you're stronger than me, we'll have to fight to find out. Garcia took a step forward as he spoke. As he said that, Garcia took a step forward, and a layer of pink energy emitted from her body, revolving around her delicate body. Guan Jing saw that Garcia smiled at him, and could not help but feel something. He thought to himself, Could it be that this young lady is really interested in me? If that's the case, then this trip was really not in vain. As he thought, he walked towards Garcia's direction with large strides, a lascivious glint in his eyes. He rubbed his hands in front of him, like a big bad wolf preparing to pounce on a little white rabbit. Of course, the premise was that there must be a fat big bad wolf of his size in this world. Garcia did not think that Guan Jing was flirting with her, because the word flirting did not exist in her mind. Seeing that Guan Jing was walking towards her with a strange expression, she could not help but feel a chill in her heart. From the previous battle, she had learned that as long as she had not completely defeated her opponent, she must go all out. With a shout, Garcia moved, and her body left a series of afterimages. She pushed her hands out in front of her chest at the same time. Her delicate little hands kept turning in the process, and with the help of the pink energy, it looked like a bright rose was blooming in front of her chest. So beautiful! Guan Jing secretly praised in her heart, and suddenly opened her arms. She did not dodge, and actually hugged Garcia directly. Garcia's palms were originally prepared to deal with Guan Jing's attack, but when he hugged her, all her techniques were useless. A pair of delicate little hands pressed on Guan Jing's chest without any fancy move. Speaking of which, Guan Jing's chest was even more plump than Garcia's, and there was no energy emitted from her body. When her hands touched the man's body for the first time, Garcia could not help but panic, and the energy of her attack was immediately reduced. However, as a Zodiac guardian, how could her energy be weak? Although it had lost its sharpness, it was still very impressive. Just as Chi Yu and the other Zodiac guardian warriors closed their eyes and prepared to accept the ending, a strange scene happened. Right in front of Guan Jing's chest, his skin suddenly turned light yellow. The rose-like energy bombarded his chest, instantly turning his clothes into powder. However, when it hit the earthy yellow skin on his chest, it was as if it had hit leather, producing a muffled sound. "What a hot chick!" Guan Jing gritted his teeth and said. However, the strange thing was that his body only paused for a moment, and he was not sent flying by Garcia. Instead, his arms continued to hug Garcia's body. Garcia did not expect such a situation. While she was screaming, she was actually hugged by Guan Jing's roguish action. The smell of a man immediately made Garcia's mind go blank. Guan Jing's arms were very strong, and coupled with his fat belly, he immediately gave Garcia full contact. Chi Yu looked at the scene in front of him with his mouth agape, and Yumo happened to be in the same state as him. No one expected the last battle between the 12 of them to turn out like this. No. Garcia screamed again. Feeling that Guan Jing's arms were getting tighter and tighter, she immediately reacted. In an instant, her pretty face turned redder than her energy, and the energy in her body exploded under the stimulation of her emotions. She suddenly struggled with her arms, and raised her right knee to hit Guan Jing's crotch. Guan Jing screamed, "You're trying to murder your husband." Out of nowhere, his fat hand blocked in front of Garcia's knee. Bang! This time, Garcia did not show any mercy in her anxiety. The fat body of Guan Jing was immediately blasted 2 meters away, and then fell heavily on the ground. Garcia gasped for breath, not because she had used up a lot of energy, but because the scene just now was too embarrassing. Her beautiful eyes were about to spit fire, and she looked at Guan Jing in a daze, not knowing what to do. Guan Jing's ball-like body was very flexible. He rolled on the ground, stood up, and patted the snow on his body. He said unhappily, "F***ck, little girl, if you cripple me there, your happiness for the rest of your life will be over. Come on, let's get hot." As he said that, he actually pounced in Garcia's direction, and his action was exactly the same as before. Chi Yu said blankly, "What do you mean by let's get hot?" Su Dong resisted the urge to laugh, and said, "Guan Jing is from Yangzhou, and let's get hot means that he wants to have sex with the girl. This fatso Guan Jing can't do anything else, but he's very strong in this aspect. Before coming here, I saw him sneaking out to meet a prostitute. According to his own book, to save money, he found a street girl, and it was said that it was only 80 yuan. When we teased him, he was very arrogant. He proudly told us that there was also a golden phoenix in a grass nest. Chapter 266. Yan Xiaoi chuckled at the side. What's wrong with that? Otherwise, why would we call him the number one lecherous Zodiac? Lecherous pig is the most suitable title for him. Of course, he's not picky at all. He's so hungry that he can't be choosy. While they were whispering to each other, Guan Jing had the upper hand. When Garcia saw him pouncing towards her again, she couldn't help but panic. She screamed and seemed to have forgotten her identity as a constellation guardian. She ran to the side in fright. The two of them were in the middle of the battlefield, one chasing and the other running, forming an extremely unique battle. Yamu's eyes were dull, and the other constellation guardians' faces also became more and more unsightly. Mephisto angrily said to Chiyu, "Is this your so-called Zodiac guardian warrior?" Chiyu helplessly shrugged his shoulders and said, "I can't control this. Who asked this to be his attack style?" Mephisto angrily stared at Chiyu and angrily roared at Jessie. "Pisces, what are you doing? Hurry up and use the constellation guardian to get rid of this breeding pig." Hearing this, Jessie's flustered heart immediately calmed down a little, and only then did she remember what she was doing. She hurriedly condensed the rose-colored energy, and under the effect of the constellation guardian, the light emitted from her body had already turned dark red. Jessie heard Mephisto's voice, and Guan Jing naturally heard it as well. She turned to look at Mephisto and looked him up and down, then shook her head and sighed. "I'm not interested in old fogies. You're definitely over 60. You're no longer in my hunting range." If not for Migueli's holding him, Mephisto would have already rushed out. Chiyu was slightly angry. "Guan Jing, be careful, don't talk nonsense." The opponent had already started using the constellation guardian. The next attack was not as easy to block as before, even though Guan Jing's body was really thick. Su Dong sighed with admiration and said, "As expected of the lecherous king. From what he said, from 60 to 6 years old, it seems like he's not going to let anyone go. Impressive. I can't compete with him." Guan Jing naturally saw the energy changes on Garcia's body. Strings of dark red roses condensed from energy constantly revolved around her body. At this moment, she looked a little more charming. Guan Jing couldn't help but drool. However, just when everyone was speechless about this perverted fatso, his body also changed. On his big belly that was exposed to the air. At the same time, his skin turned into an earthy yellow color, and his body swelled up once again. This time, he looked like he was about to explode. It looked even more like a giant ball. The change did not end there. Guan Jing's small eyes revealed a strange light, and his nose suddenly became a little bigger. It protruded forward, and at the same time, its head expanded and lengthened slightly. Its four limbs retracted slightly, becoming even shorter than before. That appearance was as strange as it could be. This time, even Mo Dan couldn't help but say, "Gosh! This fatty really had a personality." His shell grew on his back. But he actually grew it on his own belly. Hu Guang smiled wretchedly. "This is nothing. Sister Pale, have you ever seen a turtle with a pig's nose on its head? Isn't he one now?" Mo Dan was stunned for a moment, and then she couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, Guan Jing's appearance was really not flattering. However, this strange appearance also brought about a strange ability. Garcia was unwilling to look at this fatso any longer. The dark red rose energy turned into a stream and directly swept towards Guan Jing's head. It wasn't that she didn't want to attack Guan Jing's body, which was obviously a much bigger target. It was just that his extremely strong defense left a deep impression on Garcia. "You can't be so sturdy all over, right? If I can't break your stomach, I'll hit your head." In order to not see Guan Jing's pig-like appearance, Garcia even closed her eyes when she attacked her opponent. A dark red light flashed and Guan Jing's head disappeared. Everyone only saw a blur before their eyes. Guan Jing was still standing there, but his head was gone. Apart from a handful of people, no one had clearly seen what had just happened. After Garcia launched an attack with all her might, she didn't hear any movement for a long time. She opened her eyes instinctively, and when she saw the headless Guan Jing standing there motionlessly, she couldn't help but scream. It wasn't that Garcia hadn't killed before, but the appearance of Guan Jing was too terrifying. However, the scariest thing was yet to come. Guan Jing's deep voice was heard. "You hit my head off, you hit my head off, give me back my head, give me back my head." As he spoke, his headless body actually walked towards Garcia. This time, Garcia really had a mental breakdown. She couldn't care less about attacking her opponent anymore. She turned around and ran towards Yuyun. With a pale face, she said, "No, don't let him come over, don't let him come over." Yuyun said impatiently, "Garcia, what are you doing?" The fat man had merely shrunk his head into his chest, that's all. "You can defeat him, quickly go." "No, no, he's a ghost, I can't fight a ghost." Garcia's body was trembling. Guan Jing had given her a great deal of mental pressure from the beginning. At this moment, she had already lost all desire to fight and was unwilling to face that strange fatso again. Guan Jing's head popped out from his chest again. She smiled proudly and said, "How is it? Did you see that? I'm a good fighter, I can subdue the enemy without fighting. I'm the strongest. Haha, we won." No one had expected that the final battle would end in such a dramatic manner. Mephistopheles rushed forward, and just as he was about to attack Guan Jing, he was blocked by Guan Ping, who was already on guard. The energy of the two collided, and suddenly there was a violent explosion. Guan Ping pulled Guan Jing back and said with a serious expression, "Why, do you want to go back on your word?" Mephisto said angrily, "What kind of skill is that? Using such a method to obtain victory, wasn't it despicable? The match just now doesn't count. You can choose another person to fight with me." Ryue snorted coldly. "Is there a need for a rematch? All right, I'll keep you company." Mephisto's expression couldn't help but change when he sensed the dragon's might released by Ryue. He clearly saw how tyrannical Ryue was just now. He had no confidence in dealing with this powerful Tyrannosaurus Rex. He couldn't help but turn to look at Yamu for help. Yamu walked out slowly and sighed. She was about to say something, but was interrupted by Chiyu. "Everyone, come back. Miss Yamu, in the battle just now, Guan Jing was indeed a little too much. However, you have to admit that psychological warfare is a form of battle. Since Guan Jing didn't win, your Pisces constellation guardian isn't willing to fight again, so let's consider it a draw. I don't think there's a need for a rematch. I think it's time for you and me to decide who's the winner." Chi Yu's voice was very calm, but Ink Kirin's tyrannical aura spread to every corner of Mount Everest at the same time as his voice sounded. Feeling the incomparably huge pressure, both sides couldn't help but fall silent. Everyone returned to their own teams, leaving only Chi Yu and Yamu looking at each other. The fact that Guan Jing could achieve such an effect was already far beyond Chi Yu's expectations. Of course, he wouldn't expect anything more. Moreover, he didn't care about the current situation. No matter what, the battle between him and Yamu was inevitable. Since that was the case, why not let the battle start earlier? Rain Mao gently nodded. She lowered her head and said, "Thank you for your magnanimity. In that case, the outcome of today's battle will be decided by me. Since that's the case, let us decide the outcome of today's battle." A sacred aura rose from Yamu's body, setting off her beautiful face perfectly. However, at this moment, no one could see the deep sorrow in her eyes. "Chi Yu, why don't we fight in the air? I think you don't want to destroy the world's highest peak, right?" Chi Yu nodded and said, "Please." He rose into the air and in the blink of an eye, he was already 100 meters above the peak of Mount Everest. Yamu sighed and flew up with the scepter of the goddess of victory in her hand, chasing after Chi Yu's figure. When she reached the same height as Chi Yu, both of them accelerated at the same time. In the blink of an eye, they became two black dots in the eyes of the people below. At this moment, Chi-Yu and Yamu were at least 10,000 meters above sea level. Be it the Constellation Guardians or the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, everyone had a look of concern in their eyes. The upcoming duel was the real highlight of the day. At the same time, it concerned the grudge between Yamu and Chi-Yu. How could they not be nervous? No matter if it was the East or the West, they were not willing to lose their leader. Feeling the thin air around them, Chi-Yu and Yamu stopped at the same time. They calmly felt each other's aura. The two of them looked at each other in the air. Neither of them spoke. To them, the coldness in the air was not enough to affect their battle condition. As they looked at each other, Chi-Yu's gaze became colder and colder, while Yamu's gaze became more and more sorrowful. Just like that, they looked at each other. The silence made the people watching the duel below even more worried. Yamu sighed and said, "Let's do it." She lowered her head. She really did not dare to look at Chi-Yu's cold gaze. When she faced Chi-Yu alone, her heart ached even more. It was so painful that she could not breathe. Chi-Yu said indifferently, "You suffered from Ming Ming's attack just now and lost some energy. I won't take advantage of you. You should recover first. I hope that today's duel can be carried out in an absolutely fair manner. For the sake of your Greek guardians, to protect the West, I hope you can give it your all." Yamu was stunned for a moment, but she quickly reacted. She knew that her emotions had affected Chi-Yu. The sorrow gradually disappeared, and the holiness became more perfect. A faint golden light shone in the air, absorbing the energy in the air to replenish itself. The higher one was, the closer they were to the sun. Light energy was Yamu's main ability. Hence, fighting in the air was undoubtedly very advantageous for her. Chi-Yu looked at Yamu. Although he looked calm on the surface, how could he not feel pain in his heart? At this moment, he still clearly remembered the shock he felt when he saw Yamu for the first time. That perfect face had left an incomparably deep impression on him. It was also at that moment that Yamu's figure had been engraved in the depths of his heart. Later, because of the almighty relic, during the battle at Chongqing Temple, Yamu and her constellation guardians showed a side that was different from those despicable people from the Vatican. They helped him and his companions to deal with two powerful beasts. Their good impression was also established at that time. It also laid the foundation for the trip to Athens. Athens, the Aegean Sea. Those 3 months were so beautiful. Every day, he traveled with the perfect goddess. She even announced that she was his fiancée. Every scene felt so touching and wonderful. At that time, he was really completely immersed in love with Athena. Thinking of this, the lines on Chi-Yu's face could not help but soften a little. However, it only lasted for a moment. Beauty was always so fragile. When Yamu asked him for help, she was already prepared to plot against him. He used his feelings for her to help her resist possible dangers. He also completely aroused the contradictions hidden in the constellation guardians and drew out the rain cloud. The people from the Vatican destroyed the Dracula family and killed Klinsmann. When he tried his best to defeat the 4 red-robed archbishops, when everything seemed to have ended after Klinsmann's death, a fundamental change occurred. Yamu was the perfect goddess in his heart. It was the goddess that he could not even bear to desecrate. She deceived him and used her life for everyone to complete her divinity inheritance. No matter what reason she had, no matter whether she was struggling in pain or not, the outcome could no longer be changed. It was her. It was because she deceived him that he fell into a crisis of life and death. That was why the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King and Wen Ting sacrificed their lives. Those were 2 lives plus Klinsmann's. There was nothing between him and her except hatred. Even though she appeared so sad in front of him, who could be sure that her current sadness was not deliberately put on for him to see? He would never make the same mistake again. For the sake of his companions, for the sake of his lovers, and for the sake of the 3 people who had died, he would definitely destroy her in today's battle and personally avenge Wen Ting and the others. Thinking of this, the hatred in Chi-Yu's heart increased greatly, and the energy aura emitted from his body gradually stabilized. There were no emotional fluctuations. At this moment, there was only the persistence of hatred in his heart. Naturally, Yamu could see that Chiyu was not calm. His expression softened slightly just now, but his gaze soon became cold again. Although he restrained the sadness in his eyes, could Yamu's heart really be calm? She thought of everything that Chiyu had thought of. The past moments flashed through her mind like a movie. He had sacrificed so much for her, but in the end, he only received her deception. When she left Tibet that day, Yamu no longer had any hope in her heart. Come on, let it all end today. Regardless of victory or defeat, the pain in her heart would end. If she lost, then with her death, she hoped that the hatred and sadness in his heart would be resolved. If she won, then her heart would die with his death. In the future, there would only be Athena, not Yamu. The two of them were still looking at each other. Their complicated feelings had already begun to fight a battle against themselves. The divine aura gradually became stable. Yamu nodded to Chiyu and said, "We can start." As she spoke, her delicate body had already quickly drifted back. In the cold wind at an altitude of 10,000 meters, the long purple hair behind her did not ripple at all. Chiyu also retreated. Their battle was different from the previous battle between the Zodiac Guardian and the Constellation Guardians. This battle would be a battle to the death that would determine the lives of both sides. Only when one person died would the battle end. Whether it was Chiyu or Yamu, they both understood this deeply. The golden light dyed Yamu's delicate body. Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. A dark red light mixed with silver lines lit up from Chiyu's body. The source of nature, the four auspicious clouds, Kiran. The leader of the Eastern Guardians. The king of the Zodiac. Their eyes met. This time, there was no emotional fluctuation between them. It was just the gaze of Athena and the king of the Zodiac. As if an eternity had passed, the energy on their bodies bloomed at the same time. Their powerful strength began to condense rapidly. This battle did not need any foreshadowing. It was just a collision between the strongest. Looking at the light released from the bodies of the two people in the air, the 24 people watching the battle below heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, the deathly silent gazes of the two people in the air had filled the hearts of the spectators with a sense of oppression. With the eruption of their energy, although the oppression in the hearts of the spectators had disappeared, the nervousness followed. The Zodiac Guardian warriors and the Constellation Guardians understood that this battle was between Chiyu and Yamu. None of them could participate. Everything could only be resolved by themselves. Everyone was praying for the king of their side. Looking forward to it. From a distance of more than 1,000 meters, all they could see was two black dots and the energy light on their bodies. It was just two black dots and the energy light burning on their bodies. However, at this moment, no one was willing to give up their gaze on the battlefield. The golden light instantly enveloped Yamu's delicate body. She raised the victory goddess scepter in her hand. The golden light at the tip of the scepter became stronger and stronger. When the golden light shot up to the sky, the victory goddess scepter had already turned into Athena's spear. The spear pointed to the sky, and a layer of golden halo descended from the tip of the spear. In an instant it baptized her delicate body. The golden full-body armor covered every inch of Yamu's skin. The dazzling golden light was so dazzling under the sunlight. A golden round shield appeared in his left hand, and the entire body was filled with a holy aura. A special symbol, a symbol that belonged only to Athena, was imprinted on her chest armor. At this moment, Yamu had truly become the goddess of war and wisdom. The black light engulfed Chiyu's body. The huge shadow of Kiran covered his burly body. As the clouds in the sky condensed, the four auspicious clouds, Kiran, quickly changed under the confrontation of the holy aura of the opponent. It was a change that did not stop at all. When the black light expanded to its limit, it was replaced by a pure gold color. Dark red, pure gold, and silver. 3 pairs of wings were fully spread behind him. The light of the sun, moon, and stars condensed in his right hand to form a huge sword that could seize the heaven and earth. His left hand was stretched out horizontally in front of him. A jade stone that shone with the light of the 5 elements lay there quietly. The light of the 5 elements shone brightly, and the light of the sun, moon, and stars intertwined with each other. Yamu immediately activated Athena's 3 divine artifacts. Chi-Yu also gave up on using the Kirin's octatic treasures. Instead, he used the pure gold armor of the sun, moon, and stars. With the Kongtong seal in his left hand and the Xianyuan sword in his right, he entered his most powerful offensive state. Both of their auras reached their peak in an instant. The difference between gold and pure gold light wasn't that great, but their auras were completely different. Even at the peak of Mount Everest, which was more than 1,000 meters below them, everyone watching the battle could clearly feel the intense energy changes in their bodies. This was a true powerhouse. Compared to the previous battle, this was a confrontation between god-grade powerhouses. Silence. The entire space was completely silent. Even the cold wind stopped blowing. Only the sun hanging high in the sky was appraising the battle in front of them. The gold and pure gold light moved at almost the same time. Everyone watching the battle below could only see the 2 light rays passing each other and exchanging positions. There was no sound at all. However, at the position where they had collided, a circle of mixed gold and pure gold light spread out, spreading over a radius of tens of thousands of square meters. It was a dazzling sight. Chi-Yu pointed the Xianyuan sword in his hand forward. An extremely sharp energy aura pulsed on the tip of the Xianyuan sword. Yamu's Athena spear was also pointed forward. The sharp energy vibrated rapidly under the effect of the rotating holy aura. This simple strike was the collision between the 2 divine artifacts. It was also a collision between them. At that moment, both Chi-Yu and Yamu had poured all their energy into that single strike. They didn't use their domains. Given that both of them possessed such sharp divine artifacts, neither of them was willing to waste energy to use their domains. Compared to the effects of their domains, that kind of consumption was not something they could afford. The battle seemed to have become simpler between them. However, if one took a closer look, one would definitely notice that Lin Sun's aura was extremely strong. Within the 1,000-meter distance between Chi-Yu and Yamu, there were tiny cracks in the space. The Xianyuan sword was undamaged, and so was the Athena spear. This was the first time that Chi-Yu found that there was a divine weapon that could deal with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword since he encountered the Panguak. The reddish-gold light fused the sun, moon, and stars with his body. The immense energy of the union of heaven and man turned his body into a sword. The 10-meter-long giant sword abruptly swung out under the complete lockdown of energy and spirit. The golden spear merged with her body. It was as if her body was a part of the spear, or as if the spear had grown out of her body. It collided with the incomparably sharp giant sword for the second time in the air. A buzzing sound rang out. This time, except for Mount Everest, which was directly below them, all the other peaks in the Himalayas suddenly dropped 100 meters above sea level amidst the buzzing. They were flattened by the terrifying energy. The 2 of them returned to their original positions. Blood flowed down from the corners of their mouths at the same time. The sharp energy destroyed their bodies at the same time. However, the light on their bodies became stronger. The decisive battle, at the top of Mount Everest. This battle was a battle between the strongest forces in the world. In that extremely fierce collision, their bodies and minds had long forgotten everything. There was only the enemy in front of them in their eyes. Unless one of the parties in the battle died, it was easier said than done to make them stop. To contact. Both times they were evenly matched, not only in terms of energy, but also in terms of divine artifacts. The sacred sharpness of the Athena spear and the benevolent sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, neither could destroy the other. The souls of the 2 divine artifacts, like their masters, were burning their own energy, striving to burst out more powerful power. The 2 collisions had different effects. The sacred energy and the king's aura began to change. A golden hexagram appeared under Yamu's feet. She lifted the round shield in her left hand, and the spear in her right hand was still pointed forward. Qi Yu's left hand was placed in front of his chest, and the Xianyuan sword in his right hand was raised high above his head. The contest of strength had temporarily ended. What was about to unfold was a contest of skills. The two of them moved at the same time. When they collided for the third time at the midpoint between them, they did not separate this time. In midair, a huge golden ball of light appeared and completely enveloped their bodies. The people watching the battle from below could not see what was happening in the ball of light. However, an even more dangerous battle was already unfolding in the ball of light. Boom! The Xianyuan sword left a hidden mark on the shield of Athena. Swoosh! The spear of Athena left a mark on the golden armor of sun, moon, and stars. Ding! The two offensive divine artifacts collided again. Both of them trembled and buzzed. Qi Yu and Yamu were so close to each other that they could even feel each other's breath. The ripples of energy became stronger at the same time. Almost at the same time, they pushed out their divine artifact. Athena's spear thrust out at an extremely tricky angle, while the Xianyuan sword blocked at an even more tricky angle. Every time the two divine artifacts collided, there would be a buzzing sound. No one knew if they were excited by the collision, or if they were trembling because of the destructive power produced by each other. Neither side gave way to the other. Qi Yu and Yamu's reflexes were pushed to the limit. The shadows of the sword and spear kept colliding. Each collision produced violent ripples of energy. In midair, the golden ball of light was condensed from the energy produced by their collisions. As the explosion of energy became more and more intense, the range of the golden ball of light also became larger and larger. From the initial diameter of 10 meters, it gradually expanded to more than 100 meters. Qi Yu's simple Xianyuan sword was at a disadvantage against Yamu's spear and shield. Although the shield of Athena could not completely block the attacks of the Xianyuan sword like Athena's spear, it only needed to block one attack for Athena's spear to leave a deep mark on Qi Yu's crimson golden armor of sun, moon, and stars. The extremely sharp energy was tearing at Qi Yu's body. He had lost count of the number of times he had spat out blood. Yamu's gaze was unusually determined. After making up her mind, she had to use her strongest power in this battle. The wounds on Qi Yu's body increased, and the cracks on the shield of Athena also became larger as it collided with the Xianyuan sword. Yamu's gaze was filled with the conviction of victory. The only thing she needed to pay attention to now was the jade seal in Qi Yu's left hand. Since the beginning of the battle, the jade seal had not been of any use. However, intuition told Yamu that she would definitely regret it if she ignored the jade seal. Amidst the loud bang, the shield of Athena once again blocked the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. The golden energy produced an ear-piercing whistle in the air. Yamu took advantage of the opportunity when the Xianyuan sword was blocked. The victory goddess spear in her right hand had already transformed into thousands of spear shadows that completely enveloped Qi Yu's body. The solar lunisolar golden armor was no longer as dazzling as it had been in the beginning. As more and more wounds appeared, the pauldron had disappeared. Even one of the black wings had been pierced by Athena's spear in the previous battle. Seeing that Yamu had attacked with all her might with the thousands of spear shadows, Qi Yu had no way of dodging them. He could only do what he had done previously and minimize the damage to himself. However, he did not do so this time. A five-colored light appeared the instant the thousands of spear shadows approached. The massive energy light enveloped Qi Yu's body completely. The thousands of spear shadows pierced through Qi Yu's body, but it did not feel like they had pierced anything. Yamu was shocked. However, as she had attacked with all her might, it was too late for her to withdraw Athena's spear. The Xianyuan sword, which had been blocked by the shield of Athena previously, had returned. Qi Yu's body, along with the huge sword, transformed into a reddish-gold comet. It carried an extremely powerful and surging energy as it collided with Yamu's body. It was filled with devouring and destructive energy. Meteor chasing the moon's divine radiance, the second form of the Xianyuan sword, was finally unleashed after enduring for such a long time.